Hey everyone, a quick heads up. Most people who enjoy these stories haven't subscribed yet. If you're liking the content, consider subscribing and dropping a like. It truly supports the channel. And I'm glad you're here. Also, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from, so share your location in the comments. I've been running the Southwest Corridor for close to 15 years now, Nogales up through Tucson, sometimes cutting across toward Yuma when the loads are light and the weather's good. I drive a beat-up white Freightliner Cascadia, nothing fancy, but she pulls steady and the cab's mine. Smells like diesel, stale coffee, and those cheap pine trees I keep hanging from the vents. That night, I was hauling refrigerated produce north. Empty desert on both sides, just me, the hum of the engine, and the border fence running alongside like a rusted spine. It was early November, one of those nights where the air sits cold and dry on your skin, but the inside of the cab's warm enough to make you drowsy if you're not careful. I remember the time because I glanced at the dash clock when my eyes started to blur. 2:14 a.m., just outside the Arizona-Mexico line, between one of those tiny inspection pull-offs and a border patrol checkpoint still a good 30-40 miles ahead. The highway there runs almost perfectly parallel to the fence. You see it in your peripheral vision, tall, rust-red slats, spaced just enough that the darkness behind them looks like something watching you back. My high beams cut down the asphalt, picking up road stripes, reflectors, and the occasional sign half-eaten by sun and sand. The CB was quiet, too quiet for that stretch. Usually there's at least one guy cracking a joke, someone bitching about border patrol or the wait at the checkpoint. That night, static, just a low, faint hiss under the hum of the tires. I took a sip of coffee from my thermos. It had gone lukewarm and bitter. I wrinkled my nose, set it back in the holder, and rolled my shoulders, feeling the familiar vibration of the wheel through my palms. The soft rattle in the dash I kept meaning to fix. That's when I saw him. At first, my brain didn't register it as a person. Just a long, thin shape near the fence line, way out ahead in the beams. Could have been a signpost, a mile marker, something like that. But as I ate up the distance, the shape shifted, swayed. A man. He was walking the fence, not on the shoulder, but maybe 3, 4 feet off the pavement, hugging those rusted slats. His posture was wrong. Too stiff. His arms hung straight down, no swing. He moved like his joints didn't quite fit right. I eased off the throttle, not enough to brake, just enough to let the rig drift down a few miles per hour. Out here, you see migrants sometimes. You see guys in bad shape, dehydrated, lost. I've called in a few tips. I've given water when I could. So my first thought was, he needs help. I flicked the high beams twice, reflex more than anything. No reaction. He kept walking, heels planting, lifting, planting, like a machine following a track. When I was maybe 30 yards away, I finally got a clear look. He wore a light-colored shirt, something that might have once been white but was now stained and dust-caked. His pants were dark, hanging loose on his frame. But it was his skin that froze me. It looked gray. Not the gray you see in someone dead on a slab, not that waxy, bluish kind. This was like he'd been rolled in fine desert dust from head to toe. A powdery film sat on him, dulling every edge. Even his hair looked like dried clay scraped into a rough shape. I edged closer, crawling past him in the slow lane, my rig down around 45 now. He never looked up. His head was bowed just enough that his chin pointed toward his chest. I could see the line of his jaw, the hollow of his cheeks. His hands hung loose by his sides, fingers slightly curled, knuckles colorless. Every step was the same, heel, toe, heel, toe. No stumble, no variance. My heart rate picked up the way it does when you feel like you're watching something you shouldn't. "Hey, buddy," I muttered to myself, not on the CB, just into the empty cab. "You all right?" I crept up alongside him, the trailer whispering on the pavement behind me, the engine a low growl. For a second, my passenger window lined up with him and I thought about rolling it down, calling out. That's when he stopped. Just stopped mid-step. One foot half lifted like a glitch, and he turned his head. He didn't turn it like a normal person would, with the neck leading, shoulders shifting. His head snapped up and over, like somebody grabbed his skull and twisted it toward me. His face was worse up close. That gray powder I'd seen, it wasn't just dust. It filled every pore, every crease. His lips were cracked, lined with dark fissures like dried mud. His nose looked like it had been broken twice and never set right. But what made my hands clamp tighter around the wheel were his eyes. No pupils, no sclera, just milky, clouded orbs that caught my headlights and reflected them back. Twin, dull moons staring straight through the glass at me. My whole body went cold in an instant. The temperature in the cab seemed to drop 10 degrees. I felt sweat gather at the base of my neck. At the same time, a chill ran up my spine. I don't remember making the decision to accelerate. I just remember my foot slamming down, the engine roaring, the hood rising slightly as the rig surged forward. The man's face slid past my peripheral vision, then into the side mirror, then vanished in the beam of my taillights. I didn't look again for a good 30 seconds. I focused on the road, white knuckles on the wheel, trying to slow my breathing, listening to the wind chew at the cab and the tires sing on the asphalt. Just a sick guy, I told myself. Just some poor bastard covered in dust. The CB cracked with a burst of static, loud enough that I flinched, then went dead again. When I finally looked up at the mirror on the driver's side, the long, vertical one that shows your trailer stretching out behind you, my mouth went dry. There, in the narrow cone of my taillights, just within the inner glow of red, was a small, thin figure, walking, not on the shoulder anymore. He was walking directly behind my trailer, perfectly centered. I checked the speedometer, 50, maybe 52. No way a man on foot could keep pace casually like that. But he wasn't running. He wasn't even leaning forward. He just kept that same dead, mechanical step, heel, toe, his head bowed again like before. My brain fought it. I told myself it was a trick of the eye. Sometimes lights hit signs, shadows play games. But every few seconds, his outline flickered in the mirror again, just far enough back that he stayed in the soft edge of my taillight wash. Breaker. Anyone northbound on 19? You got eyes on a pedestrian on the back end of a white Cascadia? I thumbed the CB, voice tighter than I meant it to be. Silence. Not even static this time. Just dead, suffocating quiet. The only sounds were the engine humming under my boots, the faint ring of air passing over the mirrors, and my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I dropped my speed to 45, thinking maybe I was outrunning some weird reflection. The figure in the mirror didn't change. I sped up to 60, still there, same pace, same distance, no dust kicking up, no shadow stretching. The fence ran on beside me, endless and repetitive. In the mirror, him. Behind me, empty desert night swallowing the highway. In front, a two-lane ribbon of black. I tried to focus on the road, but my eyes kept flicking up, checking the mirror, watching that gray, dust-coated silhouette walk behind 40,000 pounds of truck like it was nothing. At some point, I realized the temperature in the cab had dropped again. I checked the climate controls, still set where they had been all night, but my breath misted just slightly in the air when I exhaled. It shouldn't do that in Arizona. A mile marker slid by on the right. I don't remember the number. I do remember the reflective paint looked smeared, like someone had dragged fingers through it before it dried. Up ahead, I saw the faint glow of a Border Patrol checkpoint rising out of the dark. Floodlights, cones, the low, squat outline of the station. Relief poured through me. People, lights, cameras, something normal. As I approached, the figure in the mirror became harder to see, swallowed by the glare from the checkpoint. By the time I hit the first set of cones and slowed to a crawl, the mirror showed only pavement and my trailer doors. I pulled up to the agent, rolled down my window. The outside air bit colder than it should have. He leaned up, flashlight beam slicing through the cab. "How's it going tonight, driver?" he asked. His breath fogged too. "Cold for November," I said automatically. He smiled, checked my paperwork, asked the usual questions. "Anything in the trailer that shouldn't be? Anyone back there with you?" I almost said it, almost joked. "Yeah, some guy walking behind my rig," but the words stuck. My tongue felt like sandpaper. He waved me through. I rolled past the checkpoint, slowly building speed again. The floodlights faded behind me, swallowed by the desert. The fence came back into view, running parallel once more. I waited a full minute before I let myself look at the mirror. The man was there, closer this time. He walked in the red glow like he was on a treadmill attached to my bumper. His shoulders were more defined now. I could see the outline of his jaw clearly, the way his head still bowed, the way that gray powder seemed to cling to him like a second skin. For the first time, his arms moved. They lifted, slowly, stiffly, until his hands hung out at his sides, palms forward, fingers spread. Not reaching, not grabbing, just opening as if feeling the air. I don't remember the next 10 miles. I know I drove them because I ended up in a small, rundown truck stop off an exit I'd never bothered to take before. I remember the sudden need to get off the highway, to get away from the fence, to get under lights. I pulled in, killed the engine, and sat there in the ringing silence that follows a shutdown. The faint ticking of cooling metal, the soft whine in your ears. I didn't look in the mirrors. Not at first. When I finally forced myself to glance at the driver's side mirror, all I saw were other trucks, their cabs dark, their trailers lined up like sleeping beasts. No man, no dust, no gray face. I went inside, used the bathroom, splashed water on my face. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The place smelled like burnt coffee, fryer grease, and cheap disinfectant. Ordinary, comforting. When I came back out, there was a thin trail of reddish dust on my trailer doors. Not like road grime, I know what that looks like. This was a pair of long, vertical streaks, as if someone had dragged powder-coated fingers down the metal. I wiped them. The dust smeared, leaving faint, ghostly lines behind. I've run that route dozens of times since. I avoid that stretch near 2 a.m. if I can help it. When I can't, I keep my eyes locked on the road ahead, and I never look too long in the mirrors once the fence comes into view. Some nights, the CB goes dead again in that same 10-mile strip. No chatter, no static, just silence pressing against the cab glass. And every time it happens, I feel it, that tightness in my chest, that prickle on the back of my neck. Like someone coated in desert dust is pacing me, just out of sight, heel, toe, heel, toe. Some things walk the border long after they're done crossing. I've been pulling nights on that I-10/I-25 stretch longer than I care to admit. South Texas into New Mexico, back and forth, hazmat mostly, chemicals in totes, drums, stuff you don't want rolling if something goes wrong. I run a 389 Peterbilt, long nose, dark blue with a silver stripe. She's not the newest girl out there, but I know every rattle in the dash, every whine in the gearbox. When you live in a cab as much as your own house, you get tuned to every sound. This was late fall, 3 years after Reeves rolled his rig and never walked away. I remember the exact time because it burned itself into me. 3:02 a.m., just east of the New Mexico state line, running westbound toward Las Cruces with a hazmat load. The weather was clear, cold, dry air, stars like pinholes in black fabric. Road was mostly empty, just the occasional pair of headlights way off in the mirrors. Inside the cab was that familiar mix of smells. Diesel from my clothes, the ghost of old cigarette smoke in the upholstery, burned coffee in the thermos, and dust. That dry, metallic dust that hangs in every crack and vent once you've done enough desert miles. I had channel 19 on low. Mostly static, the kind that hisses soft under everything else so you forget it's there until somebody breaks in. I was fighting that 3 a.m. drift, eyes heavy, brain starting to float, hands still on the wheel at 10 and 2, feeling the vibration through my fingers, the road hum coming up through the floor and the seat. When Reeves died, it was on this same route. Not this exact mile, but close enough that you feel it. He was hauling too, running behind schedule in a storm, and he laid his Peterbilt on its side trying to avoid something in the road. That's what the report said. Something in the road. I saw the wreck the next day. Twisted metal and glass and a cab crushed like a soda can. We'd run as a loose team for years before that, same lanes, different clocks. I used to hear his voice on 19 more than I heard my own family. Right around the New Mexico crossing, my CB spat. Not a normal burst of static. This came in like a pop, then a sharp, high squeal that made me flinch and glance at the radio. The channel light flickered once. I reached for the knob, thinking maybe a loose connection, when I heard it. "Don't take exit 112. The voice was clipped, like it was shoved through a narrow pipe. But I knew that tone, knew the way he hit his consonants, the roughness at the end of the sentence like he'd been living on coffee and highway air. Reeves. I went cold from the inside out. My fingers tightened on the wheel, and for a second I forgot to breathe. The desert outside didn't change. The dash lights glowed soft green. The hum of the engine didn't hitch. Nothing else was wrong. Just that voice, bleeding in through the static. I grabbed the mic, thumbed it. "Say again, breaker? You're hitting 19 like a bad ground." Nothing, just the usual hiss. I scanned up and down the dial, listening for some idiot playing with recordings, but everything else was dead. No chatter. No distant Mexican radio station bleeding over. Just the soft shhhhh of empty airwaves. I told myself it was a trick of the brain. I'd been thinking about Reeves, about his crash. Fatigue does weird things. You start hearing ghosts in the engine noise. That's when my phone buzzed in its dash mount. Waze lit up, screen flickering blue, then white, then blue again. My route line glowed, then snapped, rerouted itself like a snake striking. A new path blinked on. Exit 112 in 2 miles. Save 11 minutes. Heavy traffic ahead. I frowned. There wasn't heavy anything ahead. I'd seen nothing but darkness and the occasional taillight for an hour. I tapped routes, checked the alternates. The app stalled, glitched, then dumped me right back to the same rerouted path. Exit 112, bold and insistent. Little voice bubble at the top. Turn right. My hazard training slid in. Hazmat doesn't like surprises. You don't just start following some random ramp at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere because an app says so. I reached up, killed Waze with a jab of my thumb. The screen went black. The CB popped again. "Don't take exit 112. Clearer this time. Same words. Same voice. Like someone had recorded Reeves and was hitting play from 30 feet away. The hairs on my arms stood up. The cab felt tighter. The warm air suddenly stale, thin. I could hear my own breathing over the engine noise now, too loud in that little box of glass and metal. I looked ahead. A green sign loomed in my high beams, reflective paint blazing white for a second. Exit 112 to 1 mile services, 2 miles. I knew that sign. I'd passed it 100 times and never taken that ramp. One of those ghost exits that leads to a tiny frontage road, maybe a lone gas station that closes at midnight. Nothing worth the detour. The radio stayed quiet. My dash clock changed from 3:02 to 3:03 with a soft digital blink. Then the ramp lights ahead, those tall sodium vapor poles that wash everything in a dirty orange, flickered. On, off, and then they went dead. The only light left was mine. 2 cones of harsh white spilling over asphalt, guardrail, and the beginning of the exit lane peeling away to the right. The rest of the world vanished into black. The CB growled like something was climbing through the wires. A low, rising swell of static. Then the voice punched through so loud it rattled the cheap plastic casing. "Don't take exit 112. It cracked halfway through the last word, like he'd shouted from far away. I felt sweat break along my back, cold despite the heater. My left hand slid to the signal stalk on pure habit. My right knuckles were white on the wheel. "Knock it off," I muttered to myself, to the truck, to whatever. This is stress. This is lack of sleep. But my rig drifted right, tires whispering as they crossed the faint rumble of the lane divider. The hood turned just enough that the solid center line curved away in my windshield and the ghostly white of the exit arrows bled into view. The cab temperature dropped. I could feel it in my fingers first, the way the vinyl of the wheel felt slicker, colder. My breath fogged faintly. That shouldn't happen with the heater blasting like it was. Up ahead, where the dark had swallowed the ramp, something took shape. Headlights, not on, just catching my beams by reflection. Chrome bent in ways it shouldn't bend. A wide, familiar grille caved in around an invisible fist. One stack crumpled, the other snapped half off and hanging at a broken angle. A Peterbilt, lying half in the gravel, half on the shoulder. Crushed exactly the same way Reeves' rig had looked in the photos they'd shown us. Same company colors. Same flayed-open cab, roof peeled back. I felt like my heart stopped, then restarted too fast. The sound inside the cab dulled, like the air thickened. The only thing sharp was the image in my windshield. My dead friend's truck sitting on the shoulder of an exit no one ever took, under dead lights, 3 years too late. My tires hit the beginning of the gore point, the triangle of painted pavement between highway and ramp. The steering wheel twitched in my hands. A part of me wanted to follow the curve, to glide down toward that wreck, like there was a magnet hooked to my front axle. In my mirror, the interstate behind me was empty. Ahead, the ramp fell away into black, ending in twisted metal and glass. The CB screamed, not static this time, not words, just a long, distorted howl of feedback that made my teeth ache. Underneath it, buried like a second track on a damaged tape, I heard him. Keep it straight. That wrecked cab, dark, silent, mangled, shifted. The driver's door, which I knew from the photos had been jammed shut after the rollover, began to move. Creaked open, slow, against no wind. Inside was only deeper black, a rectangle of absence that swallowed my headlights. My right hand, without me telling it to, began easing the wheel further toward the ramp. I don't know if it was training or terror, but something else slammed into me at the same time. The memory of Reeves' voice from a truck stop years back, laughing at some rookie who'd followed his GPS onto a seasonal road. Road signs never lie to you, man. Screens do. You trust the lines. You trust the rails. I sucked in a breath that felt like ice and wrenched the wheel left. Hard. The trailer leaned, tires humming loud as they rode the painted triangle. For a second, I thought I'd overcorrected, that I'd feel the six-way of a tip. The truck held. The ramp fell away to my right, curving down into black. For a heartbeat, I saw the wreck at a different angle. Cab smashed, trailer jackknifed, door still opening, still inviting. Then it was gone. The angle hit it. My beams snapped back to the center line, and I was on the interstate again, engine roaring as I fed throttle to pull the trailer back into line. The CB cut off mid-scream. Silence hit so hard my ears rang. My phone in its mount buzzed once, screen flashing. When it came back on, my route was normal again. No mention of exit 112. No alternate. Just a straight line of blue across New Mexico. I drove another 10 miles before I could unclench my jaw. The desert returned to what it always is at that hour. Empty, cold, indifferent. The ramp lights behind me sparked once. Just once, a faint orange pulse in the mirror, and then went dark for good. I pulled into a truck stop outside Las Cruces just after 4. The lot was half full, sodium lights throwing long shadows across trailers, and reefer units humming in the night. I parked, killed the engine, and just sat there, listening to the tick of cooling metal. Inside, over burnt coffee, I asked the night manager if he'd heard anything about exit 112. He frowned, wiped his hands on his apron. That little nothing ramp out there? State closed it last year. Bridge issues or something. Supposed to be blocked off. Why? I told him I just saw some cones. That was a lie. There hadn't been cones. No barricades. Just open pavement and dead lights. Later, in the cab, I looked up the report on Reeves' crash. I'd read it before. I knew where it happened. I just never noticed the mile marker. Exit 112. Now, when I run that route, I leave the CB on 19 even if nobody's talking. I don't mute the static. I listen. If the app ever tries to drag me down that ramp again, I'll toss the damn phone out the window. And if I'm anywhere near mile 112 around 3 a.m. and I hear Reeves cut through the hiss telling me not to exit, I'll keep my hands locked where they belong and my eyes on the white lines. Because some warnings don't come from dispatch, or DOT, or your GPS. They come from men who already paid for the mistake. I've been running the southern lanes long enough to know what belongs on the roadside and what doesn't. My name's Cole. I haul mixed freight along the California-Mexico corridor, mostly I-8 and the veins that split off into nowhere, Calexico, El Centro, scattered inspection stations and little desert towns that feel more like mirages than places people actually live. I drive a white Freightliner with a faded blue logo on the doors. Nothing pretty, just a solid rig that's paid most of my bills. This was late summer, around 2:40 in the morning. That hour where the world feels half-finished. Too late for drunks, too early for commuters. The sky was moonless, just a black lid pressed over the desert, and my headlights carved out a small, moving tunnel of pale yellow down the empty highway. The cab smelled like my life. Diesel soaked into my hoodie, cold coffee in the thermos holder, cheap pine air freshener trying and failing to win. The vibration of the wheel sat steady in my hands, that low hum through the floor that lets you know the truck is healthy, eating pavement 1 mile at a time. I was westbound on 98, a little two-lane that parallels the border for a stretch before feeding back into the bigger arteries. Border fence off to my left, like rusted teeth in the dark. Sand and scrub to my right, broken by the occasional dirt road heading off toward ranches, checkpoints, or nothing at all. Channel 19 was on low, just enough to catch any chatter. A couple of voices now and then, guys talking about a backup near Takati, someone griping about a random inspection. CB static filled the gaps. That's when I saw her. At first it was just motion in the corner of my eye, a pale, small shape off to the right. I thought it was a stray dog or coyote running parallel to the road. I eased off the throttle a touch, more out of habit than concern. As I got closer, my headlights swept over a narrow dirt track peeling away from the asphalt. There, standing right at the edge of that dust road, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 10, 11 tops. Barefoot. Her feet were half buried in the powdery sand. Her dress, if you could call it that, looked like it had once been light pink but was now shredded, grimy, hanging off one shoulder. Her hair was dark and tangled, plastered to her cheeks. She was waving both arms at me. Not casual, not a hitchhiker's lazy thumb. This was frantic, full-bodied waving. The kind you see from people who are drowning. I felt my stomach drop. Kids don't belong out on desert roads at 2:40 a.m. Not here. Not like that. I hit my hazards, the rhythmic click filling the cab, orange strobes lighting up the night behind me. I eased onto the shoulder, checked my mirrors. Empty road. No headlights in either direction. My hand went for the CB mic automatically. Breaker. Breaker. This is westbound Freightliner on 98 near mile marker. I glanced at the green sign I just passed. 53. Got a minor on the shoulder. Female. Barefoot. Looks distressed. Any units in the area? There was a pause, then a flat, professional voice cut through the static. Copy that, driver. This is Border Patrol out of El Centro. You stay in your vehicle. We're about 8 minutes out. 10-4, I said. Hazards on. I'll keep visuals. Except I didn't stay in the truck. Maybe that's where I screwed up. Training says you stay put. But there's something about seeing a kid that overrides training. I grabbed my flashlight, slid down from the cab, boots crunching on gravel. The night air hit me, cooler than the day but still holding that baked rock heat. It smelled like dust and distant creosote, undercut by the tang of hot brakes and engine. The hazard lights ticked behind me, casting pulsing shadows across the dirt. She was still there, maybe 30 yards up, right where the pavement bled into sand. Her arms were at her sides now. No more waving, just standing. Hey! I called, raising a hand so I didn't spook her. My voice sounded too loud out there in the open. You all right, kiddo? You hurt? She didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't turn her head, just stared straight ahead, right at my truck. I walked closer, boots sinking a little into the soft shoulder. Each step kicked up a puff of fine dust that felt like talc against my jeans. The only sounds were the distant hum of my idling engine, the tick-tick of hazards, and a faint breeze hissing over dry scrub. Border Patrol's on their way, I said as I got nearer. We'll get you some water, okay? Maybe a blanket. You speak English. No answer. I lifted the flashlight, its beam cutting across her face. Up close, something was wrong. Her cheeks were too pale, almost gray beneath the dirt. Her lips were chapped and split, but it was her eyes that made me slow. They were wide open, Not teary, not squinting against the light, just wide, unblinking, like glass marbles set in a mask. She was looking right through my headlights, right through me. I stopped about 10 feet away. The fine hairs on my arms rose, like the air pressure had dropped. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, steady but heavy. You understand me? I tried again, softer now. You need help. She didn't nod, didn't speak, didn't even breathe, as far as I could see. Her chest didn't move under the ripped fabric. The CB crackled from inside my cab. I heard Border Patrol's voice faintly calling my handle, asking for a situation check. I almost turned back to answer them when something in the corner of my vision shifted. Her right hand twitched, not a full movement, just a small jerk, like a marionette string had been tugged. Then her fingers curled slightly, nails coated in dirt. Her head turned. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't the natural swivel of someone looking around. Creaked over, slow, like a rusted hinge being forced. 1 second she was staring past me at the highway. The next her eyes were locked on mine. They were too dark. Pupils blown, irises almost swallowed. In the flashlight beam, they didn't reflect anything. They just drank in the light. That's when Border Patrol pulled up. 2 SUVs rolled in behind my rig, tires grinding gravel. Their headlights washed over me and the girl, twin beams flattening everything into sharp contrast. Doors opened, radios crackled, and 2 agents stepped out, hands resting near holsters but relaxed. One of them called out, "Driver, step back toward your vehicle for me." I didn't move. I just pointed at the girl. She's right there, kid on the shoulder, bare feet. Think she's in shock or something. The agent nearest me frowned, lifted his own flashlight, and swept it right over her. His beam hit empty air. He passed it again, slower. Sand. My own footprints. The faint impression of tire tracks on the dirt road. No girl. I looked back. She hadn't moved. She was still staring at me. You don't see her? My voice sounded wrong to my own ears. Then, the second agent, older, stepped up beside his partner. He scanned the area with a practiced eye. "We got coyotes and families out here sometimes, but there's nobody there right now, driver." "She's right." I started forward, then stopped. My boot had nearly come down on something. Bare footprints, small, maybe a size 3, 4, pressed fresh into the powdery sand leading from the dirt road toward where she stood. I could see the toes, the arch, the heel. The edges were sharp, not blown or filled by wind. They stopped about 2 feet in front of her. "Look down," I said, voice shaking now. "You telling me you don't see those either?" Both agents pointed their lights where I was looking. Their beams passed right over the prints. The sand glowed pale. To them, it was smooth. "There's nothing there, sir," the older one said carefully. "You feeling all right? Any meds? Medical issues? Lack of sleep?" I wanted to argue, wanted to shout, but the words got stuck, because while they talked, both their flashlights swung away from where she was. In that instant, with their beams off her, she changed. Her head snapped. Not turned, snapped, back toward me like a rubber band releasing. Her hair lifted as if from a gust only she could feel. Her mouth opened just enough for me to see the cracked lines in her lips. Her voice was barely louder than the wind, but it threaded straight through my skull. "They can't see me," she whispered. "But you can." My skin went ice cold. Every instinct screamed to back away. Instead, I stood there, nailed to the spot, feeling my pulse drumming in my fingers. I blinked. She was gone. No slow fading, no walking away. 1 second she occupied space in front of me. The next there was just empty air, my flashlight beam bouncing off floating dust. Border Patrol's lights painted the scene ordinary again. Me, a stunned driver on the shoulder, 2 agents, a dirt road leading off to the south. Only the footprints remained, the little bare tracks that ended in nothing. I watched as a faint breeze drifted over the sand, soft as breath, starting to blur the edges. The older agent put a hand on my arm. "You sure you're okay, driver?" I swallowed. My throat felt raw. "Yeah, just thought I saw something." They took my statement anyway, asked routine questions. Any other vehicles? Any signs of crossing? Any calls on the CB? I answered, half on autopilot, half listening for any sound that didn't belong. When they left, the night swallowed the road again. I climbed back into my cab, shut the door, and sat in the dim glow of the dash, smelling my own sweat sour under the diesel and coffee. Before I rolled out, I checked my side mirror. For a fleeting second, in the smear of dust on the glass, I thought I saw a small handprint. 5 splayed fingers low on the corner, like a kid had leaned there to look in. I wiped it away without thinking. The smear stayed. I still run that corridor. Still see families and groups moving in the dark sometimes. Shadows against the fence, flutter of flashlights. You get used to real people out here. You learn what real fear looks like in someone's eyes. But that girl's eyes weren't real fear. They were absence. Like whatever should have been behind them burned away long before I came through. Border Patrol didn't see what I saw that night. Maybe they weren't meant to. Every now and then, when the CB goes quiet and the road ahead is just black and sand, I'll catch myself glancing at the shoulder, half expecting to see her waving me down again, bare feet sinking into the dust. If I ever do, I don't know if I'll stop this time. I've spent most of my life looking at America through glass. Name's Dale. Been running long haul since my 20s. I know the big arteries, 10, 20, 40, just as well as I know the little capillaries that peel off into nowhere, the frontage roads and ranch cutouts most people never see in daylight. That night I was eastbound, just past the Texas border crossing out of New Mexico, hauling a drive-in full of appliance parts. Light load, easy pull. It was late January, about 2:30 in the morning. You know that kind of desert cold that doesn't hit you like wind, just seeps through everything? That was pressing on the glass. The sky was clear, stars like a dusting of salt on black velvet. No moon. My headlights carved out their usual cone of pale yellow, eating up 2 lanes of asphalt and a bit of scrub on either side. The road ahead shimmered in that way it does at night, where distance and heat and light all blend into something that never quite looks solid. Inside the cab was its own little world. Dash lights dimmed soft green, the hum of the engine steady under my boots, the smell of diesel baked into the seats, layered with old coffee and the faint chemical citrus from a spray bottle I used on the dash. My thermos sat in its holder, half full of bitter, overcooked coffee from a truck stop 3 hours behind me. Channel 19 murmured low. Some distant chatter about a scale house being open, somebody warning about a state trooper running hot the other way. I just cleared the last inspection station, papers checked, load sealed, everything by the book. Border fence was behind me now, but you could still feel that edge, that invisible line. It does something to the air even if you're clean. Makes you more aware of who's out there with you. A few miles past the crossing, the road narrowed down to empty. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind, just the steady white dash marks flicking under the hood and disappearing. That's when I saw him. At first, he was just a darker shape in the dark, off on the right shoulder where the beam of my passenger side headlight pushed out into the scrub. I thought it was a road sign at the wrong angle or maybe some fence post. As the truck rolled closer, the shape unfolded. A man, standing just off the fog line with his thumb raised. He wore an old military field jacket, faded green, chest pockets bulging a little like they were stuffed with something. Dark jeans, worn-in boots that had seen dirt instead of fashion. A duffel bag sat at his feet, the strap loose, canvas stained. His other hand wasn't jammed in a pocket like most hitchhikers I've seen. It hung straight down at his side, fingers closed in a loose fist. It was the temperature that got me. I watched my outside temp gauge drop a couple degrees as I approached. From 36 to 31 in the span of maybe 15 seconds. Not impossible, but strange. The windows fogged slightly at the corners, where the defroster didn't quite reach. His face came into view as he turned slightly toward my beams. Shaved jaw, dark hair clipped short in a military cut. Early 30s, maybe. He looked normal. Normal enough, anyway. But he didn't move the way people usually do when 70,000 pounds of truck rolls toward them. No step back, no flinch, just that thumb steady, like he was carved there. I don't usually pick up hitchhikers. Company doesn't like it, and hazmat runs make it a hard no. But this was just appliances. And that cold hit me again when I glanced at the gauge. 29 now. Desert cold is a different kind of ugly when you don't have a truck wrapped around you. The reasonable part of my brain said, keep going. The other part said, if that man dies out here and you were the only one who saw him, how are you going to live with that? I flipped on my right indicator, felt the cab lean as I eased onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched under my tires, threw small clicks against the undercarriage. I coasted past him, watched him in my mirror for a second as he shrank in the glass, then came to a gentle stop. My passenger door lock thunked open. I reached across and popped the latch. He was faster than I expected. 1 second he was in the mirror, the next he was pulling the door open, sliding one hand up to the grab bar with a practiced motion. Cold air poured in around him, thick and sharp, carrying the smell of dust and something metallic. Appreciate it, he said, voice low but clear. No accent, no tremor. He climbed up smooth, duffel in one hand, boots finding the steps without looking. He slid into the seat, set the duffel at his feet, and shut the door with a soft click. I eased back onto the road, engine grumbling as the rig picked up speed. The hazards ticked for a few beats, then went quiet when I switched them off. Inside the cab, the heater tried to reclaim the space, blowing warm air that suddenly felt thin. Cold one to be out walking, I said. He nodded once, eyes forward on the road. Yeah. His jacket creaked when he moved. I caught a whiff of something under the dust and cold gun oil, faint but familiar. My old man had been military. You don't forget that smell. Name's Dale, I offered. You headed east or just anywhere? East is good, he said. Name's Mason. Something about the way he said it made me think he didn't use that name much anymore, like he was trying it back on. We rode in silence for a minute. The cab filled with the normal sounds. The low rumble of tires over pavement, a faint whistle from the vent on the passenger side, CB static rolling like distant surf. My eyes kept flicking to him without meaning to. He sat straight, not slumped like folks who've been walking for hours. Hands flat on his thighs, fingers relaxed. His boots were dusty but not caked. The duffel at his feet bulged in a squared-off way, like it was packed tight. Something started to itch at the back of my mind. Took me a minute to figure out what it was. He wasn't blinking. His eyes were open, focused on the road ahead. Not wide, not staring, just set. Normal enough if you glanced. But I drive nights. I notice when people get quiet tired, when their lids droop, when they blink slower to fight sleep. He didn't blink once for several miles. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance ahead, growing from pinpricks to two clear orbs. As they approached, the interior of my cab caught the spill. Light slid across my hands on the wheel, my arm, the dash, casting soft shadows against the opposite side. My reflection wavered faintly in the passenger window. Mason sat still. Light brushed across his face and jacket, but it didn't throw a shadow of him onto the dash or door panel. His outline didn't interrupt the glow on the seat behind him. It was like he absorbed the light rather than blocked it. I told myself I was tired. I told myself I was reading too much into headlight bounce. Night plays tricks. You coming from base? I asked just to hear something human. He tilted his head slightly. Used to, he said. Been out a while. Where you headed? He paused like he had to think about it. Away, he said finally. Far enough that they don't look for me. The CB crackled, some driver laughing about a speed trap near Odessa. Mason didn't react. He didn't even glance at the radio, though it was chirping a few inches from his knee. The outside temp gauge had dropped to 25. My fingers tightened on the wheel. The heater was pushing, fan on high, but a damp chill clung to the passenger side of the cab. I could see a faint haze of condensation on the bottom corner of his window that wasn't on mine. Another truck passed us going west, lights washing the cab again. I watched this time. Watched the way the beam hit my hands, the way my shoulder cast a pale shadow on the seat behind me. Mason's profile lit up, and the space behind him didn't change. The seat back stayed evenly lit, No silhouette, no break. I kept driving. A rest area sign rolled past. Rest area 10 miles. Next 64 miles. I'd been planning to push past it, get another hour under me. But the longer he sat there, the more the urge to stop dug in. Not panic, just this gnawing sense that I needed to not be rolling when whatever this was decided to go sideways. "You can hop out at the rest area," I said. "There's usually someone around. Vending machines, bathrooms. Better than road shoulder." Mason nodded once. "You shouldn't sleep there." Came out so casually that it bumped against me a second late. "What?" He tilted his head a fraction toward me, not enough for his eyes to leave the windshield. "That place up ahead. You shouldn't sleep there. They find people who sleep there." The way he said "they" wasn't playful. It wasn't like campfire stories or trucker legends. It was flat, like he was giving a weather report. "Who?" I asked. The word felt small in my mouth. He didn't answer. The rest area entrance came into view. A wide loop of asphalt peeling off the right. A single sodium vapor light buzzing over the bathroom building. A few picnic tables, concrete trash cans, a couple of semis parked nose out, silhouettes hulking in the half-light. It looked like every other lonely patch of state-maintained concrete I'd ever used. I signaled anyway, turned in. Gravel popped under the tires as I swung wide, lined myself up along the far edge of the truck parking. I didn't plan on sleeping. I just wanted this man out of my cab. The temp gauge hit 21. The little icon flickered like it couldn't decide if it wanted to warn me about freezing conditions. I set the brake. The truck hissed, air systems exhaling. The cab settled with a small creak. Mason hadn't moved. "You can get out here," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "Lights, bathrooms, couple rigs already here." He breathed in once, slow. "You shouldn't sleep here," he repeated. Then softer, "Not again." I turned my head to look at him squarely, to ask what exactly he meant by again. The passenger seat was empty. No slow fade, no door slam, no shifting of the truck. 1 second, there was a man in a field jacket sitting beside me. The next, the seat held nothing but an indentation in the cushion. His duffel bag was gone. The passenger door was still locked. The child lock latch was in place. No dome light had come on, no alarm chime. For a few seconds, all I heard was the soft ticking of cooling metal and the distant rumble of another truck's reefer unit. My own breath sounded too loud in my ears. Then I saw it. On the cracked vinyl of the passenger seat, right where his legs had been pressed, there was a patch of frost. Not fog, not condensation. Frost. White crystals in the exact shape of where his thighs had rested, trailing down toward the floor mat like something had seeped through him into the truck. I reached out without thinking, fingertips brushing the edge. It burned. Not like heat, like touching dry ice. A sharp, piercing cold that went straight into the bones of my fingers. I jerked my hand back with a hiss, watched as my own breath plumed in front of my face. The inside of the windshield on his side had frosted over too. A faint oval just about the size of a human head resting back against glass. In that oval, for a heartbeat, I thought I saw the suggestion of features. Eyes, a mouth. I blinked, and it was just frost. I didn't sleep there. I dumped the brake, rolled out of that rest area so fast I almost forgot to check my mirrors. As I pulled back onto the highway, I glanced once in the passenger side mirror. Under the jaundiced glow of the rest area light, the trucks that stayed behind looked wrong. Shadows pooled thicker around the cabs than they should. For just a second, I thought I saw shapes moving between them. Tall, thin forms bending toward sleeper windows, drifting along doors. The temp gauge climbed back to 28, 32, 36 as the miles fell away. The frost on the passenger seat melted slowly, leaving the vinyl damp, then drying. The smell of cold metal faded, replaced by diesel and coffee and the familiar stink of my own sweat. A week later, at a truck stop 2 states over, I heard 2 older guys talking at the counter while we waited for coffee. They mentioned that rest area mile marker out in the Texas nothing. Said there'd been a run of bad things there. A driver found cold in his bunk with the engine off. A car with the doors locked. Family inside like they'd just gone to sleep and never woken up. No signs of struggle. No carbon monoxide. Just gone. I didn't say anything. Just stirred sugar into my coffee and watched the steam curl. I still run that route. Still see hitchhikers now and then. Military jackets. College kids. Drifters. I don't stop anymore. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe it makes me smart. Hard to say from this side of it. But I'll tell you this. Every time a pair of oncoming headlights floods my cab at night, I glance at the passenger seat and the dashboard. I make sure my own shadow is the only one I see. And if I ever catch sight of a man by the roadside again whose body throws no shadow in the light, I'll keep rolling no matter how cold it is, because some rides aren't about getting someone where they're going. They're about warning you where not to stop. I've been running the southwest border lanes long enough to know the difference between what belongs on the road and what doesn't. Name's Rick. I pull dry van and reefer up and down the Texas-Mexico line, mostly along that isolation strip where the interstate peels away from the towns and just shadows the border fence for miles. You get used to seeing weird things out there. Border patrol trucks tucked behind mesquite, spotlight helicopters, dust devils that look like they're chasing you in the mirrors. But this wasn't wind, and it wasn't any SUV built for this world. This was last spring, just after midnight. I'd crossed eastbound through the El Paso area and was running along that long empty stretch where the lights thin out and the highway feels more like a landing strip than a road. Weather was clear, air cold and dry. Stars sitting low and sharp over the desert. Inside the cab, it was the usual mix of smells. Diesel soaked into my flannel, old coffee in the thermos, that faint, plasticky scent of hot electronics from the dash. My Peterbilt's engine hummed under my boots, a steady vibration in the floor and steering wheel. The air in the cab was warm, maybe too warm, making my eyelids heavy. So I cracked the driver's window an inch and let in a ribbon of cold night. Channel 19 was mostly dead. A couple drivers talking about a shutdown back in Las Cruces. Then nothing but static and the low hiss of background noise. The road ahead was empty. No taillights to chase, no oncoming beams, just my headlights eating the center lines one after another. Out on my left, the border fence ran parallel, a dark sawtooth line against the stars. On the right, just sand, brush, and the occasional dirt track cutting off toward ranch land or nothing. I first noticed the SUV when I caught a shape in my driver's side mirror that didn't belong. At that time of night, any set of headlights behind you stands out. But there were no lights, just mass, a darker block of black, hugging the lane right behind my trailer. I frowned, leaned forward a bit, adjusted the mirror. It was there, tucked in behind my DOT bar, just far enough back that if it had lights on, they would have been burning straight into my eyes. But there were no headlights, no markers, no reflections off a chrome grille, just the faintest impression of a boxy front end, a wide hood, the silhouette of a roofline, like somebody had cut an SUV shape out of the night and pasted it to my trailer. At 65 miles an hour, following distance like that is suicide. You don't ride right up on a 48-foot trailer in the dark, not unless you want to eat it when the driver taps the brakes. I eased off the throttle a little, letting the rig drift down to 60. In the mirror, the dark block shrank a hair, then slid closer again. Matching. All right? I muttered, thumb flicking the CB. Eastbound on the border strip, got a four-wheeler riding my DOT bar with no lights. You awake back there, partner? Turn your damn beams on. Nothing. The radio hissed quietly. No voices, no clicks, no bleed-through from Spanish music stations. Just that soft, constant FFFF of empty air. I tried again, broader. Brake 1 to 9 for any eastbound. You boys seeing a black SUV stalking you out here? No plates, no lights. Silence. I watched the mirror. The shape never drifted, never weaved. No bounce over expansion joints. It stayed pinned in that same impossible spot, like it was anchored to my trailer. My phone buzzed in the dash mount. A little notification from my dash cam app pinged on screen. Rear event detected. I'd put a second camera back there after a hit-and-run scare. It only saved clips when something got too close or there was a jolt. I glanced back at the mirror, saw the SUV still glued to me, no more than a car length off my ICC bar. "Fine," I said under my breath. "We're going to do this the hard way." I bled off more speed, dropping to 55. The block of darkness lagged, then glided up again, sticking. My trailer felt light. This load was nothing but boxed medical supplies, so I knew exactly how hard I could hit the brakes without upsetting it. I tapped the brakes twice, just enough to flash my taillights and make the trailer nod. Any normal driver would back off. The silhouette didn't move, didn't even jitter. I tried the opposite. Rolled back on the throttle, brought it up to 70. The engine note climbed. Wind noise picked up around the cab. Distance markers came faster. The SUV shape stretched in the mirror for a moment, like something struggling to keep up. Then, as if it had never moved, it was right back where it had been. Dead center behind my trailer. No headlights, no grille reflection, no glow on the pavement. A patch of night glued to my ass. That simmering unease in my chest started to curdle into something colder. Up ahead, a green sign floated into the beam of my headlights. Way station, 12 miles open when flashing. The amber lights on the sign were blinking. Way stations at that hour are a pain when you're tired, but they're also well lit, staffed, and covered in cameras. If someone wanted to mess with a trucker, they'd think twice about doing it under DOT snows. I thumbed the mic again, more to hear my own voice. Eastbound approaching open scale in 12. Whoever's on my bumper, you're about to meet some friends. Still nothing on 19. Temperature in the cab felt off. The vent was blowing warm, but there was a damp, clammy chill settled along my neck and shoulders, like someone had opened a window behind me. I checked. Both sleepers' curtains were drawn, back windows shut, everything sealed the way I'd left it. The border fence on my left fell away for a while, replaced by low dunes and scrub. The world out there felt thinner, like if I stepped out of the cab and walked far enough into that darkness, I'd fall off the edge of something. The miles ticked down. 10, 8, 5. That black shape never left my mirror. At 3 miles out, I caught movement ahead, overhead floodlights painting the sky a dusty orange. The outline of the way station complex rising out of the dark like a ship. The open sign flashed on the ramp. "All right," I breathed, signaling right. The turn indicator clicked loud in the cab. My trailer lights winked on and off in the mirror, bathing the SUV silhouette in pulses of red. In those flashes, I finally saw more than just shape. It was a black SUV, older, square-bodied, like a late 90s Tahoe or Suburban. No front plate, no state tag on the back, just a blank rectangle where it should have been. Windows were pitch dark, no cabin lights, no driver silhouette. The paint didn't reflect right. It swallowed my taillights instead of bouncing them. I pulled onto the ramp, feeling the gentle curve guide me off the main line. The SUV followed, still welded to my back end. The highway peeled away to my left, a river of asphalt disappearing into nothing. Ahead, the way station waited, bright white floods, green amber-red signals over the lanes, a DOT office with windows glowing. "Let's see you follow me in here," I said. As I rolled down to 25, the SUV should have either backed off or gone around. There was room on the left for bypass traffic, but in the mirror it simply kept its place, too close, too calm. My rig jolted as we crossed the scale plates. The load shifted slightly. The familiar thunk-thunk under the tires echoed through the frame. Behind me, nothing. The mirror swung with the motion, but where the SUV had been, there was only pavement. The ramp stretched back to the highway, empty. No car merging in behind, no headlights merging left. The hairs on my forearms stood up. I cleared the scale, followed the signal into the inspection lane. An officer in a reflective vest stepped out of the building, clipboard in hand, his breath fogging under the floodlights despite the desert. I set the brake. The truck gave that long, tired sigh as the air dumped. Engine idled down to a steady thrum. The officer climbed up a step, leaned into the open window. "Evening, driver. Need to see your logs, registration, and bills of lading." I handed everything over automatically. My eyes kept flicking to the mirror. "Everything all right?" he asked, noticing. "You get any cameras on that ramp?" I said instead of answering. My voice sounded a little off to my own ears. Something was on me out there. Black SUV. No lights. No plates. Followed me 12 miles. Then just wasn't there. He frowned, attention sharpening. "You sure it didn't pass you on the main line?" "Positive. Never left my bumper until the last second. You can see it on my dash cam." I tapped the small screen mounted on my dash, the one that mirrored my cloud feed. Rear cam flagged an event. He hesitated, then said, "Let's take a look." We rewound the feed. On the screen, grainy footage of the ramp played in reverse. My trailer backing away from the scales, the empty stretch behind it, then, a few minutes earlier, that black block materializing out of the dark. We let it roll forward. The SUV was clearer in the camera's eye than it had been in my mirror. Boxy, late 90s style. No markings, no plate, no reflections in the windows, just black glass. It held the same impossible distance off my DOT bar for mile after mile, never gaining, never falling back, floating over imperfections in the road like it wasn't quite touching the pavement. The timestamp in the corner ticked along steady. 17 minutes and 22 seconds. 23 minutes and 9 seconds. 31 minutes and 48 seconds. As we approached the way station, floodlights showed up as a glow on the horizon. The SUV's shape didn't change. No brake flash when I slowed. No twitch when my trailer shook. Then, just before the scale plates, the feed glitched. One frame. SUV filling the view. Too close. Its hood nearly under my bumper. Black glass filling the top of the screen. Next frame. Empty ramp. No blur of motion. No turning signal. No streak of taillights. It was just there 1 second and gone the next. The officer's knuckles went white around my clipboard. He paused the feed, scrolled back, watched that 2-frame jump 3 more times. His jaw worked. In the harsh overhead light, his face had gone a shade paler. "We've had drivers report that same vehicle since the 90s, he said finally, voice low, like he didn't want the walls to hear. "Black SUV, no plates, no lights, sits on your bumper along the isolation strip." I stared at him. "What is it? Cartel? Some kind of sting vehicle?" He shook his head once, eyes still on the frozen frame of my empty ramp. "Whatever it is, it never shows up on our cameras. Only ever on yours. And every time somebody decides to stop out there, pull onto the shoulder, let it pass." He swallowed, glanced toward the dark highway beyond the floodlights. "They don't make it to a scale, or a truck stop, or home." He handed my paperwork back with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "You did the right thing bringing it under lights. Next time you feel it behind you, don't stop on the strip. Don't pull over to talk. Just get to the nearest place like this, where other people are." I rolled out of that way station with my heart beating a little too fast and a tightness in my chest I couldn't blame on caffeine. The rest of the night, nothing followed me. The sky stayed clear. The fence slid by on my left like it always does. But every time I checked my mirrors, I half expected to see that block of darkness glued to my trailer again, eating up my taillights. I still run the border lanes, still see all the usual weird. Stray border patrol trucks, flashes of lights from the Mexico side, animals cutting across where they shouldn't. But I don't drive that isolation strip around midnight anymore if I can help it. And if I ever feel something on my bumper that doesn't show its lights, doesn't back off, doesn't pass, I won't be one of the drivers who stop to find out what it wants. Some things out here aren't interested in getting around you. They're interested in where you finally pull over and kill the engine. I've been running freight along the southern border long enough to know what real fear looks like. Name's Tom. I pull mostly dry van and reefer between Laredo and San Antonio, sometimes cutting east toward Corpus when the loads line up. My usual path is that stretch north out of Laredo, skirting close enough to the border that you can see the fence in your mirrors if you crane your neck right. I'm in a 17 Kenworth T680, white, no frills, with a sleeper that smells like diesel, sweat, and too much truck stop coffee. This night, I was northbound out of Laredo with a half-full reefer, Produce headed for a warehouse outside San Antonio. It was late January. The air dry and cold enough that the stars looked like they'd been pinned in place. The kind of night where sound travels far, but everything feels muffled inside the cab. I remember the time because I checked the dash clock right before it happened. 4:17 a.m. That's the dead spot for me. Too late to feel like night, too early to feel like morning. I was maybe 15, 20 miles out from a small border patrol checkpoint. Just a couple of concrete buildings, floodlights, and a lane or two with green and red signals. The highway there runs parallel to a service road that hugs the fence. Just a narrow strip of asphalt and dirt for border patrol and maintenance vehicles. To my right, empty brush and mesquite. To my left, that service road, the fence, and the black beyond. Inside the cab, I had the heater set low, enough to cut the chill but not put me to sleep. The vents blew warm air against my boots, the smell of old coffee and vinyl wrapped around it. The reefer unit hummed a steady note behind me. My hands rested easy on the wheel, feeling that familiar vibration from the road through the column. Channel 19 was quiet, too quiet for that corridor. You usually hear at least a couple of guys grumbling about wait times at the checkpoint or some local traffic between border patrol rigs. That night, it was just a soft background hiss, like someone breathing through the speaker. The road ahead was mine alone. No headlights coming, no taillights to chase. Just the rhythmic flash of the white lane markers in my beams and the occasional green glow of a mile marker sign sliding past. I caught the movement on my left before my brain knew what it was. At first, it registered as a shadow that didn't match anything. Something pacing the truck, just outside the spill of my headlights. I glanced at the mirror, then out the side window. That's when I saw him. A man was running along the service road beside me. Not jogging, sprinting. He was barefoot. I could see how his feet hit the packed dirt and broken asphalt, hard, sloppy, barely lifting before the next step. Each impact must have been like landing on glass and rock. His pants were torn at the knees, dark with what looked like dried mud or blood. He wore a thin shirt, soaked with sweat down the spine, clinging to him in the cold. What froze me wasn't the state he was in. I've seen migrants out there before. People in bad shape trying to make it to anywhere that isn't what they're running from. What froze me was his speed. My speedometer sat just under 60. My cruise was on. At that pace, I passed most everyone. But this man was right there, holding even with my cab, legs pumping, arms pistoning, his breath coming in harsh, ragged bursts I could hear faintly even over the engine. He should have been falling behind after 2 seconds. Instead, he stayed locked to me like we were tethered. And he was looking right at me. His face was wrong. Not in a monster way, just in a way that said he'd run past whatever point a body was made to go. His eyes were wide, white showing all around the irises. His mouth was open so far I could see the strain in his cheeks. His chest heaved, ribs visible under his shirt. His lips were split. Every time his foot hit the ground, little flecks of something dark came from his mouth, spraying into the cold night air. He kept screaming the same thing, over and over, his voice scraping raw. Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. Each time he hit the stop, the word broke off like he was coughing up glass. I lifted my foot off the throttle without thinking, tapped the brake just enough to feel the rig tug back. My truck slowed to 55. The runner didn't gain, didn't fall back. He matched it stride for stride, bare feet slapping the ground. My hand went for the CB mic automatically. Breaker, breaker. This is northbound out of Laredo near the checkpoint. I've got a male on the service road, appears injured, running alongside. Anybody got an eye on this? Instead of static or a voice, the speaker emitted a single, long tone. Not feedback, not a squeal. It was low, flat, unwavering. It sounded exactly like a heart monitor flatline in a hospital drama. One continuous note that set my teeth on edge. I pulled the mic away from my mouth, checked the channel. The display still read 19. I flipped to another channel. Same tone. Turned the volume down, then up. The tone didn't change in volume. It just stayed. The runner's voice cut through it anyway. Don't stop. Don't stop. His eyes weren't on the road. They were locked on me, on the cab, like he was measuring how far it would take me to do the exact thing he was screaming at me not to do. Every instinct I had was split down the middle. One half said, "You're a human being, this is a man bleeding and barefoot in the dark, you stop, you help, you call it in." The other half said, "Nothing that can keep up with a 60-mile-an-hour Kenworth barefoot on a service road at 4:17 a.m. is something you want within arm's reach." I tightened my grip on the wheel, feeling sweat gathering under my palms despite the cold. The heater had started to blow unevenly. Cold air licking at my ankles in short, biting bursts, like the cab couldn't decide what temperature it wanted to be. Up ahead, far but growing, I saw the first faint glow of the checkpoint lights bleeding into the sky. The runner saw them too. For the first time since I'd noticed him, he tore his gaze away from me and looked up the road. His body pitched forward, like he was trying to find just a little more speed. Blood, real, dark blood, streaked his shins, sprayed from the soles of his feet with every step. He veered closer to the fence, then back toward the service road, like he didn't quite remember how wide the world was anymore. "Don't stop!" he shouted again, words cracking. "Don't stop for them." My mind snagged on that. Them who? Who? I heard myself shout, my own voice sounding strange, distant in the cab. "Who are you talking about?" He whipped his head back toward me so fast I heard something in his neck pop. Imagined it, maybe, but the sound was there. His eyes locked on mine through the side window. For the first time I saw that they weren't just scared. They were desperate. The kind of desperate you only see in people who have already died in their heads and are running on whatever's left. He opened his mouth to answer. That's when he hit it. He was 2, maybe 3 feet from the edge of the highway now, on the packed dirt right beside the asphalt. 1 second his legs were churning, sending up little clouds of dust. The next, his whole body snapped backward like he'd run full tilt into a glass wall. There was nothing there. No fence, no barrier, no signpost, just air. His feet flew out from under him. His shoulders hit first, then the back of his head. I saw the impact in horrifying detail. How the skin on his forehead folded. How his jaw clamped shut from the force. How his arms splayed out as if something had swatted him. He didn't bounce. He didn't roll. He flattened against nothing I could see and then crumpled straight down, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. My stomach lurched. I stomped the brake out of reflex, then caught myself, letting off enough to keep from jackknifing the trailer. The rig shuddered, engine braking kicking in, the reefer unit whining at the sudden change. I glanced at the passenger side mirror. There was no body on the ground. There were footprints, though. 2 long, raw streaks in the dirt where his feet had churned. A churned-up patch where he'd hit, but no man, no blood, just disturbed earth and a faint dust cloud settling. The flatline tone in the CB cut off mid-note. Silence rushed in, thick and loud. For a moment, it was just my engine, my tires, my own breathing too hard in my chest. Up ahead, the checkpoint lights grew brighter. Floodlights, a green sign over the road. A Border Patrol SUV parked off to the side. I drove. I didn't loosen my grip on the wheel until I was right up on the cones. The agent at the stop waved me to a halt. I rolled down the window, cold air spilling in along with the smell of dust and the faint oil tang that clings to those places. "Morning, driver," he said. He was young, face drawn in that way you see on people who've worked too many nights in a row. "Citizenship. U.S.?" I said, voice hoarse. He must have heard the strain, because his eyes flicked up to my face longer than usual. "You okay?" "There was a man," I said. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Back there on the service road, running alongside, barefoot, bleeding. I stopped. I didn't know how to explain the speed, the invisible wall, the way the man had vanished. "You got cameras on that stretch?" I tried instead. He was screaming for help. He was saying not to stop. The agent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He shifted his weight, glanced past my cab toward the darkness I'd just come out of. "We've got some coverage," he said slowly. "Out there used to be one of the main routes. Smugglers would run people up from the river and dump them near this road. Tell them to run for the lights. Some made it. A lot didn't. They'd get turned around in the brush. Dehydration, exposure, coyotes, other things. He paused, not for effect, like he was measuring whether to say the next part. You're not the first driver who's mentioned runners, he added. People keeping pace that shouldn't be able to. People yelling. By the time our units get there, there's nothing. No fresh tracks. No bodies. Just old sign. He handed back my license and bills. Fingers cold even through my gloves. If you see someone out there again, he said quietly, call it in. Keep moving. Don't stop on that strip. Whatever's out there now, it's not how it used to be. He waved me through. I rolled out of the checkpoint with the strange impression that I hadn't really left anything behind me. The smell of dust rode in the cab. My ankles still felt that unnatural draft from the vent, though the heater gauge read normal again. As the miles put distance between me and that stretch, the sky started to lighten, just a thin gray seam on the horizon. Morning was coming. The road filled in with a car here, a pickup there, another trucker pulling ahead. The world looked normal, but every time I glanced at my driver's side mirror, I could see that empty service road running parallel, and in my mind, I kept overlaying what I'd seen. The man's bare feet slapping the dirt at 60 miles an hour, his mouth torn open as he screamed the same warning that every instinct in me wanted to ignore. Don't stop. Later that week, off duty, I looked up some reports. Quietly, no one likes a driver who talks about seeing things on the road. But buried in old local stories and half-remembered CB chatter were mentions of bodies found near that stretch. People who almost made it to the asphalt. Tracks that ended in circles of scuffed earth, as if they'd run straight into something that wasn't there. I still run that route. It's my bread and butter. But when I hit that mark at night, near the remote checkpoint, I sit up a little straighter. I watch the service road. I listen to the CB, waiting for that low, impossible tone. And if I ever see someone keeping pace with me again, bleeding and barefoot in the dark, begging me not to stop, I'll do the only thing I think might actually be helping them. I'll keep my foot on the throttle and leave them to the road that never let them reach it. I've been running the southern border long enough to know every checkpoint, every way station, every little cluster of green and white SUVs that pop up like cactus in the dark. Name's Harris. I haul refrigerated freight out of Laredo, Brownsville, and sometimes as far west as Nogales. Produce mostly meat sometimes, stuff that doesn't like to be late. My rig's a red 2019 Freightliner Cascadia. A little rattly in the dash, but the engine's sound and the bunks broken in enough that I can sleep on command. This was early 2025, late January. I was hauling out of McAllen, Texas, pushing west toward Laredo on 83, then planning to cut up to San Antonio. Night run. Empty lanes, fewer four-wheelers, fewer idiots on their phones. The sky was clear, no moon, stars sitting low and sharp over the scrub. The air was cold in that way South Texas gets when the sun's been gone a while. Dry, thin, enough to sting your lungs if you step out without warning. The road ahead lived only in my headlights. White lane stripes, the faded yellow centerline, the occasional reflector winking by. Inside the cab, it was its own world. Dash lights dimmed to a soft green glow. The reefer unit hummed behind me, a steady, low drone. The heater pushed just enough warmth at my boots to keep the cold out, carrying the familiar blend of smells. Stale coffee from the thermos, diesel soaked into my hoodie, a chemical lemon from the wipes I'd used to clean the dash a day ago. Channel 19 was half dead. Every now and then a voice cut in. Somebody talking about high winds closer to the coast. Another guy complaining about a scale house that had been open all day. Between those bursts, it was just CB hiss, the soft, constant static that becomes part of the background once you've done enough miles. I was getting to that zone where the road feels like it's looping. Same scrub, same fence line, same reflector spacing. I checked the dash clock. 1:43 a.m. The kind of time where you can convince yourself the world outside your high beams doesn't exist. That's when I saw the sign. It slid into my lights. Big green reflective board on 2 metal posts. Checkpoint 34 to 2 miles, all vehicles prepare to stop. I frowned. I knew this stretch. Knew the Laredo checkpoint, knew the bigger permanent stations. But checkpoint 34 wasn't ringing a bell. Might have been one of the smaller pop-ups they use, I told myself. Some temporary facility, maybe reopened after an upgrade. A smaller sign followed half a mile later. Checkpoint 34. Open, be prepared to stop. The yellow lights on the sign were flashing. I thumbed the CB out of habit. Any westbound out of McAllen? You boys know 34's open tonight? Nothing. Just that soft hiss. I tried again, broader. Breaker 1 to 9, westbound on 83. Sign says checkpoint 34 in 2 miles. Didn't think we had a 34 out here. Anyone confirm? Silence. No clicks, no echo from another channel. Just the tires humming under me and the wind's low whistle around the cab. Up ahead, the night thickened, not darker, just denser. A faint halo of light sat on the horizon, too low and too contained to be a town. As I got closer, I started to make out structure. Tall floodlights, a couple of low concrete buildings, arm gates over the lanes. Looked like a checkpoint, just smaller than most of the ones I'd seen. The closer I got, the stranger it looked. Most modern checkpoints are bright. LEDs, sodium vapor, whatever's cheap and efficient. This place looked tired. The floodlights threw a dull, yellowish cast that barely reached the edges of the pavement. One of them flickered weakly, buzzing in the cold. The buildings were square and squat, concrete that had seen better paint. The signs over the lanes weren't digital. They were old-school metal frames with glass lenses, the kind that lit up green or red from behind. The big sign over my lane glowed green. I slowed to 15, hazards clicking quietly. My headlights swept over the scene. A couple of Border Patrol SUVs parked off to the side, older models with blocky bodies and the old striping. The American flag hung limp on a pole, half visible in the washed-out light. And the officers. There were 4 of them that I could see. 1 by the office door, 1 near the rear of an SUV, 2 in the lane ahead. All in uniform, all wearing dark jackets, all standing perfectly still. No one talking, no radios crackling, no shifting weight from one foot to the other. They could have been mannequins placed there for a photo op, except their faces weren't blank. They were watching me. As I rolled up, the guy nearest my lane stepped forward. His movements were off. Too smooth at first, then a little too stiff, like someone starting a puppet with a slow motor. He walked up to my window at a measured pace, boots making no sound on the concrete, at least not one that reached me over the engine idle. He was pale, not working nights pale, sick pale. His skin had that gray cast you see on people who've lost too much blood. His lips were cracked, dried to almost white at the edges. His eyes were dark and sunken, but they were clear, focused straight on me. I rolled the window down a few inches. Cold air poured in, carrying a faint smell of dust, oil, and something else I couldn't place, like old paper left in a damp basement. "Evening, officer," I said. "Everything all right?" He didn't ask for my license, didn't look at my DOT sticker. He didn't even glance at my trailer. He just stared at me, mouth working once before words came out. When they did, they were dry, like they'd been held behind his teeth too long. "Turn back," he said. Not barked, not ordered, just stated, flat and final. I waited for more, for the explanation. Wreck ahead, drug sting, flooded lanes, something. Nothing came. Cleared my throat. What's going on up there? Accident? Closure? His jaw moved, slow, like he was trying to remember how. His eyes flicked past me for the first time, toward the dark road behind my trailer, then back. "Turn back," he repeated. Same tone, same dryness. My fingers curled tighter on the steering wheel. The heater in the cab hiccuped, then started pushing out cooler air. Not cold yet, just enough that I felt a draft around my ankles. I glanced past him at the others. They hadn't moved, not an inch. Still at their posts, one by the SUV, one near the office, one in the far lane. All facing my rig, all utterly still. Something about the whole scene started to feel thin, like I was looking at a photograph instead of a place. "Look, I've got a scheduled delivery," I said, more to hear my own voice. Can I at least get a reason before I reroute 40,000 pounds of reefer? The officer's cracked lips pulled apart a little more. For a second I thought he might smile. He didn't. His voice dropped, not louder but heavier. Turn back. My scalp prickled. The back of my neck went cold. I blinked, and they were gone. Not walked away, not stepped out of frame. Gone. The lane ahead of me was empty. The patch of concrete where the officer had been standing was bare. No footprints, no shadow. The SUVs I'd seen a moment ago were still there, but they weren't the same. The white paint was sunburned and peeling, tires flat, windshield spiderwebbed. One sat at a bad angle, front end crumpled from some long-ago impact that had never been fixed. The floodlights overhead hummed, but two of them were dark, glass shattered, wires hanging. The green, open lens over my lane was dark. The arm gate that should have barred the road hung broken, one end on the ground, splintered. The office door, the one I'd seen closed seconds earlier, now hung crooked on one hinge, glass blown out, paper taped to the inside long since faded. Loose sheets fluttered across the lot, scraping faintly along the concrete when the wind kicked up. The whole checkpoint looked like it hadn't seen a live soul in years. My heart thudded once, hard enough that I felt it in my throat. I rolled the window up slowly. The cab suddenly felt too small, too full of my own breath. The smell in the air changed, less like damp paper now, more like dust and burned things. The CB, which had been politely hissing in the background, let out a sharp pop in my speaker. For a second I heard voices overlapping. A jumble of radio traffic, some English, some Spanish, all too fast and layered to make out. Then it cut off, back to quiet. My dash cam dinged softly. A little icon in the corner of the screen flashed. New event. Saved. I eased off the brake, let the truck crawl forward a bit, eyes scanning the empty lane. No movement, no officers, no fresh tire tracks in the dust. I should have just turned around right then. But part of me needed proof I wasn't slipping. I idled up another 20 feet, enough to clear the checkpoint structures, then stopped and set the brake again. The truck exhaled, air hissing out of the lines. I tapped the dash cam screen, brought up the last clip. On the tiny display, grainy but clear, I watched myself roll into checkpoint 34. Watched the green lens over the lane glow. Watched the SUVs, clean and intact, sitting where I'd first seen them. For officers stood in frame. The one closest to my door stepped forward, a second before I had seen him do it. His face was the same. Pale, lips cracked, eyes too dark. The audio picked up my window whirring down. He leaned in closer on the screen than I remembered him being. "Turn back," he said. The mic caught every rasp of his dry throat. I watched the timestamp in the corner as he spoke. 1 hour, 43 minutes, and 12 seconds. January 23rd, 97. Not 2025. 1997. I blinked, looked at the digital clock on my dash. 1:46 a.m. The date on my phone, January 23rd, 25. I looked back at the camera. The officer on the screen stared out at me with an intensity that felt wrong for pixels. Behind him, just for a second, before the clip cut out, I saw something I hadn't seen when I was actually there. Farther back, near the office door, the glass blew inward on the recording, though there was no wind on the screen. Shadows moved inside, quick and chaotic. Something sprayed against the interior wall, dark even in the low resolution. One of the other officers jerked, staggered, fell out of frame. The feed glitched. Lines tore through the image. Then it snapped back to live view. Empty lane, broken gate, door hanging off, paper skittering. The timestamp corrected itself automatically. January 23rd, 25. 1 hour, 46 minutes, and 3 seconds. I felt sweat on my upper lip even though the cab had gone strangely cold. I deleted nothing, just backed out of the menu and sat there with my hand on the wheel, the engine idling, the reefer humming behind me like nothing had happened. The smart thing to do would have been to U-turn right there and find another route. Instead, I rolled forward slowly, clearing the checkpoint, eyes flicking between the road and my mirrors. As my trailer passed the ruined gate, a gust of wind kicked up. Papers lifted across the lot, one slapping flat against my passenger window. For a heartbeat, it stuck there, held by some static or moisture. Even through the glass, in the weak glow of my dash lights, I could read 3 words stamped at the top in bold black letters. Checkpoint 34, permanently closed July 14th, 1997. The paper peeled away, whipped off into the dark. I drove. I didn't breathe right again until the ghost of those floodlights was gone from my mirrors and the highway returned to its usual empty self. Later that night, at a crowded truck stop outside Laredo, under the too bright fluorescence and the smell of fryer grease, I asked quietly about 34. An older driver, gray in his beard and wrists lined with old sun, stared at me for a long second. Checkpoint 34's been closed since the late 90s, he said. Cartel hit it hard. Pulled in a fake convoy opened up on the place. Lot of good people died there. He shook his head. They tore most of it down, but some of the structure's still out there. State never finished the job. He took a sip of his coffee, eyes drifting past me, like he was looking down a road only he could see. Every few years, he added, someone claims they rolled through it like it was still open. See officers, hear warnings. Then everything's dust and busted concrete again. I didn't tell him about the dash cam. Didn't tell him about the date stamp. Didn't tell him how, in that clip, the officer looked like he already knew what was about to tear through his checkpoint, and still took the time to lean in and tell somebody decades away from him to turn back. I still run that stretch. Still past the turnoff where checkpoint 34 squats in the dark. More rubble than station now. I don't look directly at it as I go by. But sometimes, if the hour's late and the air's cold enough, I swear I see a faint, sickly glow out there where no lights should be. A hint of green over an old lane. A figure by an invisible gate, waiting. And if I ever see the sign again, checkpoint 34, open. Be prepared to stop. I won't. I'll take the long way around and let the dead officers at 34 give their warnings to some other driver who won't listen. Because whatever raided that checkpoint might have ended it in 1997. But something out there is still trying to keep us from driving into the same fate. I've been running the border long enough to know every bend in the asphalt by feel. Name's Eli. I haul electronics and general freight between San Diego and the inland hubs, Otay Mesa, Tecate, then out toward Yuma or up toward Riverside. I drive a blue 2018 Kenworth T680, nothing fancy, but I keep her clean. She's got that permanent smell inside. Diesel in the seat foam, stale coffee in the cup holders, and a hint of fast food that never really goes away. This happened on a night run heading east out of San Diego, skirting the border cliffs. If you've ever driven out that way, you know the stretch, winding highway, steep drop on one side, black hills on the other, border fence somewhere in the dark. On clear nights, you can see the faint glow of towns in Mexico if you look south long enough. This wasn't a clear night. Fog rolled in off the Pacific around midnight. Not a light mist. This stuff was thick as concrete, a wall that swallowed everything beyond 100 feet. My high beams just threw white at me, so I dropped to low beams and let the fog lights do what they could. The cab felt tight, like the world outside had shrunk to whatever fit in my windshield. The wipers squeaked now and then, clearing condensation. The heater blew a low, steady warmth at my legs. The engine hummed under me, familiar and calm. Channel 19 was quieter than usual. A couple guys had been talking earlier about delays at the Otay crossing, but by the time I hit the cliffs, all I had was soft static and the occasional pop of a distant mic keying and unkeying with no words. My GPS, a dash-mounted commercial unit I trusted more than most dispatchers, showed my usual route. A clean line along the highway, following the curves. TA looked good. No closures, no detours. I passed a sign I'd seen 100 times. Next services, 32 miles. The world beyond the glass was nothing but gray. Fog has a sound when it's this thick. The way it muffles everything, sucks up tire noise and engine echo. It made the cab feel like a capsule moving through cotton. About 15 minutes into that, the GPS glitched. The map froze for a second, then jumped. My little truck icon slid sideways across the screen, off the highway line, then back, then off again. The display flickered, the backlight pulsing like it was thinking too hard. "Come on," I muttered, tapping the corner. The unit usually handled dead zones fine, but the cliffs sometimes messed with reception. The map redrew itself. Now there was a new line on it. It branched off my usual route, just ahead. A short spur that cut through the hills and rejoined the highway a mile later. On the screen it looked like a tunnel, a straight shot beneath a stretch of rock that the main road usually wound around. I frowned. I'd driven this run for years. I knew where the road construction was, which overpasses were new. I'd never seen a tunnel icon on this stretch. The GPS voice chimed in, calm as always. "In 800 feet, turn right. Enter tunnel." My headlights picked up something through the fog. The faint suggestion of a side road leading into blackness. A rectangle of deeper dark, like an unlit underpass or a tunnel mouth cut into the rock. There were no orange signs, no detour boards, no barrels, just a two-lane spur heading into that rectangular dark. I eased off the throttle. Breaker 1 to 9, eastbound out of San Diego. "Anybody know about a new tunnel on the cliffs?" I asked, thumb on the CB. Static. I tried again, switching channels. Nothing. It was like the fog had eaten the airwaves, too. The road under me angled gently right. The main highway continued its shallow curve along the cliffs. The spur peeled off more sharply, disappearing into that black opening. The GPS spoke again. "Turn right. Enter tunnel." The icon of my truck slid neatly onto the spur, like it belonged there. I told myself it was a new construction shortcut I hadn't read about, something the state had opened recently. The fog made everything look unfamiliar. The GPS knew the route. The tech had saved me more times than I cared to admit. I put my turn signal on. The rhythmic tick-tick sounded unnaturally loud in the cab as I eased the Kenworth onto the spur. The pavement felt the same under the tires. The white shoulder line glowed faintly in my low beams. The fog thinned for a few feet, just enough for me to see the tunnel mouth ahead. It wasn't concrete. It wasn't finished at all. The opening looked hacked straight into the rock. No sign panels, no height markers, no reflective borders. Just rough, dark stone forming an arch over the road. Water beaded on the edges, catching my lights like rows of tiny eyes. I should have backed out then. I didn't. I had momentum. The trailer tracked behind me. The fog pressed on my rear like a curtain. The tunnel mouth filled my windshield. By the time my brain caught up to my unease, my bumper was crossing the threshold. Sound changed the instant I entered. The muffled quiet of the fog was replaced by a low, hollow echo. The engine note bounced back at me from the walls. The tires sounded different too, less smooth hum, more textured hiss like the surface had changed. I glanced at the mirrors. The tunnel behind me fell away into black within 20 feet. My taillights glowed on the rocky walls, then were swallowed by darkness. No fog inside, just stale, damp air. The walls were close. No shoulders, no emergency pull-offs. Just two narrow lanes, barely wider than my rig, with rough walls that looked like they'd been carved with anger instead of blueprints. Moisture clung to them in patches, running in thin, shining veins. The smell hit me next. Not the open, dusty smell of the desert. This was earth wet and old, like the inside of a cellar that hadn't been opened in decades. There was a metallic tang riding under it too, faint but there, like rust or old blood on iron. I dropped my speed to 20, then 15. The tunnel seemed straight, but the way the headlights bounced off the rock made it hard to judge distance. I felt the claustrophobia setting in, the sense that if anything came at me head-on, I wouldn't have room to breathe, much less maneuver. The GPS sat steady on the dash, now showing my little truck icon moving through a straight, gray bar labeled simply, tunnel. Estimated time saved, 4 minutes. As I crept forward, the walls changed. At first, it was just streaks, darker mineral lines running down the damp stone. Shadows my eyes tried to turn into shapes. Then one of the streaks caught my attention. It wasn't random. It was a handprint, smudged, elongated by the roughness of the rock, but unmistakable. 5 fingers, a palm, dragged down the wall in a long, wavering trail. The imprint was darker than the surrounding stone, like whatever had made it had seeped into the pores. I swung my eyes to the other side. More handprints, hundreds of them. Some were small, child-sized, some larger than my own. They overlapped, smeared, layered atop one another. Some were pressed flat, fingers splayed wide. Others were streaks, like the owners had tried to claw their way forward or back along the wall. As my headlights crawled over them, the cab felt even smaller. I could almost imagine a crowd pressed against both sides of the tunnel, leaving those marks as they scraped by. The temperature in the cab dropped a few degrees. My breath didn't quite fog, but the warm air from the vents suddenly felt thin. The CB popped softly, once, as if someone had just keyed it, then let go. Breaker 1 to 9? I tried more to test than to talk. My voice sounded too loud in the tunnel. Anyone reading me inside this cut? Nothing. Not even static now. Just a low hum, like the tunnel was eating the radio waves and keeping them. I went another 50 yards. Handprints thickened, turning into a continuous smear of darker stone on both sides. Some looked fresher than others, less faded, less absorbed. Halfway through, the world behind me stopped. It felt like someone had draped heavy cloth over the rear of the truck. The mirrors went dark. Not darker, it was already dark, but absolute. My taillights should have been visible, reflecting off the walls. Instead, the mirrors showed nothing. Just black rectangles where there should have been some trace of red glow. I eased off the throttle, heart thudding harder now. The engine idled, the truck rolling on its own momentum. The darkness behind me felt thick, physical, like if I opened the sleeper curtain, it would spill in. The headlights flickered once, just a pulse, long enough for the tunnel to vanish for a heartbeat and leave me staring into a void. Then they came back. The walls were closer now. I was sure of it, even if the tape measure wouldn't have agreed. The handprints were at windshield height, palm after palm, fingers trailing, some pressed down hard enough that the stone seemed smoother there. Something hit the side of my trailer. Not hard, more like a flat slap. Then another, on the other side, like open hands striking canvas-wrapped walls. The truck didn't rock. The wheel didn't yank. The sound was there, though dull, meat-on-metal impacts lost almost as quickly as they came. I gritted my teeth, shoved the throttle forward, bringing the speed back up to 20, then 25. The engine roared louder in the enclosed space, drowning out everything but the hiss of tires on wet stone. The GPS beeped. My eyes flicked down for a second. The map had shifted. The tunnel bar was gone. My truck icon sat on a blank gray field. No roads, no markers. Underneath it, the coordinates wandered, numbers jittering like they couldn't decide where I was. For 2 seconds, they settled. A small label appeared beneath the dot. Mexico. 3 miles south of the border line I knew I hadn't crossed. I snapped my eyes back up. The handprints stopped. One moment the walls were smeared with them. Dark palms, dragging fingers, overlapping marks. The next, the stone ahead was bare, just wet and rough. The ceiling dropped a little, then rose. The air felt less heavy, less occupied. A thin haze formed ahead. Not fog exactly, just a paleness that grew brighter. I realized it was daylight, not full morning, but a softer, natural light, seeping in from an opening just beyond my beams. The engine strain eased as the road sloped up slightly. I rolled out of the tunnel and back into open air. The transition was sharp. 1 second stone and damp and darkness, the next I was back on familiar highway. The cliffs dropped away on my right. The border fence was a dark line in the distance. The fog I'd driven into earlier was gone, either burned off or left behind. The sky was gray, the kind of pre-dawn that makes everything look flat. My mirrors showed empty road, a curve behind me, the usual reflective posts. No tunnel mouth. I checked, twice. Where the spur should have been, where I'd turned off, there was nothing but a sheer rock face and the continuation of the highway's guardrail. No side road, no cut into the stone, just asphalt and painted lines. The GPS beeped again. The map snapped back to normal, my truck icon sliding along the expected route on the US side. No tunnel, no detour, no 3-mile excursion into another country. I drove the next 10 miles on autopilot, eyes on the road but mind turning over what I just passed through. There was a small border patrol checkpoint up ahead. Routine. A couple of green and white trucks, agents with flashlights, floodlights washing everything pale. The agent who leaned up to my window had that tired, wired look of someone halfway through a long shift. He asked the usual questions. Citizenship, cargo, where I was coming from, where I was going. I must have looked rattled because he squinted at me. "You all right, driver?" "Yeah." I lied. Fog's playing tricks. He glanced past me, then frowned. "You got some mud or something on your trailer. Looks like streaks." I checked the passenger mirror. In the harsh checkpoint lights, I saw them. Smears. Long, vertical streaks running down both sides of the trailer, from about shoulder height to the rub rail. They weren't mud. They weren't quite dirt. They were darker, clinging to the aluminum like something rubbed in by a lot of hands over a very long time. I got cleared and rolled on. Finished the haul. Unloaded. Parked. The smell of wet stone and old air didn't leave the cab until days later. I went back through my dash cam footage that week. Front-facing, rear-facing, GPS overlay. On the recording, the fog stretch is clear. Then there's a moment of static, a couple of seconds of gray nothing, and then I'm back on the open highway. No tunnel, no carved walls, no handprints. The GPS log, though, that's still there. A spike in the breadcrumb trail. A jag south 3 miles over the border, then back, all in the space of a minute or two, with no recorded speed that would make that physically possible. I still run that route. On clear nights, the cliffs look like they always did. I've never seen that spur again. Never had the GPS tell me to enter a tunnel that shouldn't exist. But every now and then, when the fog rolls in thick off the ocean and the rest of the world disappears beyond the hood, my GPS will stutter. The map will freeze for half a breath. And for that half a breath, I feel the air in the cab go colder, heavier, like the entrance to something is waiting just outside my beams, one wrong turn away. There are a lot of tunnels under that border. Some official, some not. Maybe one of them isn't dug through rock at all. Maybe it's cut straight through whatever separates here from where the handprints never make it to the light. I've been driving long enough to know that most things you see on the shoulder at night are bad news. Name's Royce. I haul dry van and reefer up and down the southern lanes, New Mexico into Texas, then across toward Houston, sometimes cutting down closer to the border when the loads are paying right. I'm in a white 2016 Peterbilt, a little faded on the paint, but the motor's strong and the cab's mine. Smells like diesel soaked into every seam, stale coffee in the cup holders, and a hint of fast food grease that never really leaves. This was early spring heading east. I just crossed from New Mexico into Texas on I-10. That stretch where the desert feels like it goes on forever and the sky sits low and heavy over the road. Night run. Less traffic, fewer idiots, more silence. It was a little after midnight, 12:23 a.m. according to the dash clock, one of those numbers that sticks whether you want it to or not. The weather was clear. No fog, no rain, just cold dry air and a strip of blacktop cutting through it. Stars scattered overhead, pale, washed out a little by the faint glow of El Paso somewhere behind me. Inside the cab, everything was as it should be. Dash lights dimmed to a soft green glow. The hum of the engine under my boots. The low whine of the tires eating lane stripes. The heater was on low, pushing warm air around my ankles. The reefer unit behind me grumbled its steady rhythm. My thermos sat in the holder, down to the last inch of bitter coffee. Channel 19 was quiet. Now and then a voice would cut in. Someone talking about a wreck way up near Midland. Another guy bellyaching about fuel prices. But they were distant, fading in and out under the constant hiss of static. Mostly it was just me and the road, and the faint CB noise that's like a heartbeat in the background when you've done this long enough. The shoulder was empty. No parked semis, no state troopers, no four-wheelers with blinkers on. Just tumbleweeds in the dark and the occasional sparkle of animal eyes way out beyond the ditch. catching my lights for a second and then gone. I remember how calm it was right before it changed. A faint flicker of red appeared up ahead on the right side of the road. At first I thought it was a tail light from a broken-down car or a hazard marker on a parked rig. It was low to the ground, steady, not moving. As the miles closed, the shape sharpened. It was an emergency triangle. One of those reflective, fold-out triangles you're supposed to set up if you're disabled on the shoulder. It sat perfectly straight, centered just off the fog line, glowing red in my headlights. Beside it, kneeling on the shoulder, was a woman. She was positioned right next to the triangle, not behind a vehicle, not beside a car. Just there, in the dirt and gravel, long black hair falling forward to hide her face. She wore a pale dress or shirt, hard to tell from the cab, but light enough that it caught my beams. Her shoulders were hunched. Her hands rested on her thighs. Her head was bowed. There was no car, no truck, nothing else. The sensible part of my brain tossed up a red flag. This isn't how breakdowns look. But there's another part that speaks louder when you see someone on their knees on the shoulder in the middle of nowhere at midnight. I eased off the throttle, felt the truck settle back. My foot hovered over the brake. The engine tone dropped, the hum under my boots changing pitch. I flipped on my hazards. Click, 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 filling the cab. Amber flashes now lighting the road behind me in the mirrors. I scanned for a wreck, skid marks, debris, anything. Just the woman, just the triangle. Breaker 1 to 9, I said into the mic, eyes not leaving the shoulder. Eastbound on 10, just crossed into Texas. Got a female kneeling on the right shoulder with a triangle out. Can't see a vehicle. Anyone else got eyes? Static. Not the usual gentle hiss. This was thicker, louder, like my speaker was full of sand. Any westbound passing me? You seeing this? I tried again. Same static. Rolling over my words, swallowing them. I let go of the mic, watched the woman get closer in my beams. Her hair didn't move in the wind. The hem of whatever she was wearing didn't flutter. The night wasn't dead still. I could feel a cross breeze tugging at the trailer, but there was no sign of it in her. Up close, she looked wrong in ways I couldn't immediately name. Her posture was too straight for someone kneeling on gravel. Her arms hung just a little too far forward, hands resting on her thighs like she'd been placed that way. Her head stayed bowed, chin tucked, hair spilling like a curtain. I slowed to around 30, my rig crawling now. The triangle sat about level with my bumper. I rolled the passenger window down a few inches, cold air pouring in, bringing the smell of dust and hot brakes. You okay? I called out, leaning slightly to the right. You hurt? Where's your car? Her head didn't move. Her shoulders didn't flinch. What I didn't like was how clear her voice sounded when she answered, without lifting her face, without shifting so much as a fraction. She whispered, I set this out for you. The words were soft, but they threaded through the engine noise and the wind and the reefer hum like they had a direct line to my ears. No accent, no quiver, just a flat, matter-of-fact statement. Every hair on my arms stood up. I reached for the window switch, thumb fumbling. Before I could touch it, every light on my rig died. Not flickered, not dimmed, went out. Headlights gone, dash lights gone, hazard flashers gone, trailer markers dead. The world snapped into total blackout. 1 second I was wrapped in green dash glow and halogen beams and amber flashes. The next I was sitting in a moving coffin of glass and steel hurtling down an interstate I could no longer see. The only sound was the engine. The sudden absence of light was so complete it felt physical, like a weight dropping over me. I slammed my foot onto the brake. ABS chattered, the rig shuddering under me, the loaded trailer pushing forward. My stomach lurched as the deceleration threw me against the shoulder belt. For a heartbeat I thought, this is it. I'm gonna plow off the road or into something I can't see and they'll find me upside down in a ditch. Then, just as fast as they'd gone, the lights came back. Headlights snapped on, soaking the shoulder, the triangle, the guardrail in white. Dash lights flared to life. Hazard indicators resumed their steady blink like nothing had happened. The truck was at a dead stop. Right lane skewed a little, but not in the ditch. My hands were locked on the wheel so tight my fingers ached. And the woman who'd been kneeling by the triangle was no longer on the ground. She was standing inches from my driver's side window. Her face was pressed to the glass. Her hair, which had fallen forward before, now hung straight down her back, revealing everything. Her skin was pale, almost gray in my headlights, stretched tight over her cheekbones. Her lips were parted slightly, colorless and cracked, like she hadn't had water in days. There was dirt smeared along her jaw, up onto one cheek, as if someone had grabbed her there. But it was her eyes that froze me. There were no irises, no pupils, just white, not milky like someone blind, just flat, uniform white from corner to corner, glossy like wet porcelain. They reflected my dash lights in two small, warped points. She didn't blink, didn't fog the glass with her breath. She just stared in, inches from my face, like she'd always been there and I was the one who just flickered into existence. My right hand inched toward the door lock without me meaning to. Some instinct thought, lock it, as if that piece of plastic meant anything. I forced my eyes away from her long enough to glance at the side mirror, needing to see the triangle, needing some anchor in this. The triangle wasn't in front of my truck anymore. It sat on the road directly behind my trailer, perfectly centered in the lane. Reflective sides glowing red in my taillights that had just, somehow, come back to life. I'd seen it up ahead, on the shoulder, kneeling woman beside it. I hadn't reversed. I hadn't moved around it. But there it was, like I'd passed over it and it had slid into its proper place behind me. A faint tapping pulled my gaze back to the side window. The woman's hand was up now. Her palm rested against the glass, fingers spread, nails short and dirty. The skin of her hand looked wrong. Too thin, veins like faint blue wires beneath the surface. Where her palm touched the window, the glass began to fog. Not from breath, from her skin. A perfect handprint of condensation bloomed out from under her palm, fingers and all, like the cold was seeping in from her side. Her mouth moved. Her voice was quieter now, so soft I had to lean a fraction closer to catch it. Every part of me screamed not to, but the cab had shrunk down to the space between her face and mine, and there was nowhere else to go. I set this out for you, she whispered again. You're the one who stops. I swallowed. My tongue felt like dry cloth in my mouth. I'm not stopping, I heard myself say, though I clearly already had. I'm leaving. Her head tilted, just a bit, like a bird hearing something far off. Her eyes didn't refocus. They stayed locked on mine, white and empty. Not yet, she said. Something shifted under the truck. Felt like a hand sliding along the frame. A scrape, then pressure, like fingers testing the weight of the rig from below. The trailer rocked, just enough that it shouldn't have. No wind, no other vehicles passing, no curve. The CB crackled. Not with static, with something else. A long, low sound that rose up through the speaker like wind through a tunnel, building until it almost carried words. For a second I thought I heard my own voice coming back at me, distorted, saying something I hadn't said yet. Then it cut out. I jammed the truck into gear with a force that made the stick clack against its detent. My foot found the throttle, heavy, desperate. The woman's handprint on the glass darkened, condensation thickening. Her lips parted further, jaw lowering, like she was about to open her mouth wider than any human should. I didn't wait to see how far it would go. I released the brake and mashed the pedal. The engine roared, the cab shuddering as the transmission grabbed. The truck lurched forward, tires chirping on the asphalt before catching and rolling. For half a second, she stayed right where she was, face still pressed to the glass, sliding along the window as if she were fixed in place and the world was moving around her. Then she snapped out of frame. One moment inches from me, the next gone, replaced by black shoulder and white fog lines streaking by. In the mirror, the triangle behind my trailer flickered once, as if considering whether to follow. Then it went dark. Not out of my lights, dark. Gone. The space it had occupied was just empty lane, receding in the mirror like nothing had ever been there. I didn't touch the brakes again for 10 miles. The dash lights held steady. The CB stayed dead silent. The external temp reading hovered where it had been. Physical facts, all of them, but they didn't do anything to slow the pounding in my chest. When I finally pulled into a well-lit truck stop outside Van Horn an hour later, the ordinary ugliness of sodium lights and cracked concrete felt like sanctuary. Other rigs, other people, fryer grease smell when I opened the door. I checked my truck, walked around it with a flashlight, pretending I was just doing a post-trip inspection. Tires, lugs, lines. Underneath, the frame was dusty, muddy in places, but no fresh scrapes, no handprints, no sign that anything had touched it. The only thing out of place was on my driver's side door glass. Faint, almost gone from the warmer air and the passage of time, was the outline of a handprint. Larger than mine, fingers too long. Condensation from somewhere that hadn't respected the fact the window is supposed to separate in from out. I wiped it with my sleeve. Smeared, then faded. I asked around in the diner, casual. Any accidents on 10 by the state line? Any talk of women on the shoulder? A couple of the older drivers traded glances. The kind that said they'd heard things and weren't sure how much to say. One of them finally spoke. "Lot of wrecks near that stretch," he said. "People see triangles, flares, whatever. Stop to help. Troopers show up later. No disabled vehicle, no marker, no nothing. Sometimes not even the truck that stopped. Triangle on the shoulder in the dark? That's not always the person you're helping. Sometimes it's the thing that wants you parked." I drove out of there in broad daylight, sun high, sky clean. The emergency triangles in my own side box suddenly felt less like safety gear and more like bait with reflectors. I still run that route into Texas. Still watch the shoulders. Still do what I can when I see a real breakdown. Lights on, hazards flashing, truck, driver, the whole story. But if I ever see a lone triangle sitting clean in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but a kneeling figure beside it, no vehicle, no skid marks, I'm not stopping. Some warnings on the road are for you. Some are about you. And some are set out by something that's been waiting a very long time for a driver who always tries to do the right thing. I've been driving long enough that the underside of a trailer doesn't scare me. Name's Luke. I pull flatbed up and down the southern lanes, Laredo, Eagle Pass, over toward El Paso. Steel, machinery, pipe, heavy stuff that'll kill you if you don't respect it. I run nights when I can. Less heat, less traffic, more time to think with just the road and the engine for company. This was a southbound run out of San Antonio, crossing into Texas border country in the early hours. I was hauling structural steel, bundles stacked and chained down on a 48-foot flatbed, headed for a yard not far from the Texas-Mexico line. Nothing exotic, just weight and responsibility. The truck's a 2018 Kenworth T680, red, with the usual lived-in smell. Diesel soaked into the seat foam, old coffee in the thermos holder, a hint of sweat and dust in the sleeper. Dashboard lights dimmed to that soft green glow that's easy on the eyes after midnight. The CB sat on channel 19, murmuring now and then, mostly just static. Outside, it was that dead time of night that belongs to insomniacs and truckers. Around 3:40 a.m. The sky was clear, stars low and hard. Air cold and dry enough that every breath out the cracked window felt like paper. I just cleared one of the last major checkpoints and had about 20 miles to go before my exit. You get into a rhythm out there. Engine hum under your boots, the steering wheel vibrating just enough to remind you you're moving 65 through a lot of nothing. The fence flickered in and out of view off in the dark. Every now and then a border patrol unit would show up as a pair of headlights on a distant service road, then vanish. The only real light ahead was a small turnout on the right, one of those gravel pull-offs with a single dead streetlight leaning over it. I knew that spot. I'd used it before to check loads when the wind was nasty. The steel on my deck had a bit of a whistle to it that night, a high, almost singing note you get when the air slips between straps just wrong. I glanced at the clock, 3:39, and felt that nagging itch that tells you to check your rig, even if you know everything is probably fine. Flatbed drivers get that itch more than most. I hit my blinker, listened to its loud, hollow tick echo in the cab, and eased off the throttle. The truck drifted toward the exit, tires crackling when they left asphalt and found gravel. I rolled to the far end of the turnout and straightened out, nose pointed back toward the highway so I could merge quick if I needed to. Air brake side when I set the parking brake. The truck settled, steel creaking almost imperceptibly on the deck. The reefer hum wasn't there. It was just me, the engine idle, and the sound of wind scratching across open ground. I shut the headlights off but left the markers and hazards on, bathing the rig in faint amber pulses. The turnout around me was mostly dark. That streetlight had long since given up. Its head was tilting slightly, glass dusty and dead. I opened the door. Cold air slapped the warmth of the cab off my face, carrying that mix of smells you only get riding this close to the border at night. Dust, old asphalt, a hint of something metallic from the fence and the miles of wire running along it. My boots hit the gravel with that dull crunch you feel up your legs. The world sounded bigger outside. Wind in the scrub, distant rumble of some other truck way out on the interstate, my own engine humming. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and started my walk around. Habit. Checked the steer tires, lug nuts, fuel caps. Then back along the frame, looking for leaks, listening for air hissing where it shouldn't. The hazard flashers ticked steady, casting rhythm on the steel beams strapped to my deck, orangey pulses that made the shadows jump. When I got to the trailer, I checked the straps. Palm on the webbing, feel for slack. 1, 2, 3. Each ratchet was still tight, chains snug against the beams, bindings where they should be. I was crouched at the rear passenger side, hand on the last strap, when I heard it, scratching, not loud, not like claws on metal, more like nails on rough wood in the next room over. Fast, patterned, stop-start, too regular to be random. It was coming from under the trailer. I froze, hands still on the ratchet bar. The wind hissed over the turnout. The engine idled. The scratching continued. Scritch, 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 scritch. Then a pause. Then again in little bursts. First thought was an animal. Stray dog, maybe a coyote nosing around for roadkill. Could have been an armadillo or something caught in there. The last thing I needed was some critter chewing through an airline. I clicked the flashlight on. Its beam cut a narrow tunnel through the dark, white and harsh against the gravel. I aimed it under the rear of the trailer, sweeping the beam across the landing gear, the cross members, the shadowed space beneath the deck. "Hey!" I called out, voice sounding too loud in the open air. "Get out of there. Go on." The scratching stopped. The silence that followed felt aware. I took a step closer, gravel grinding under my boot. The beam of my light shook just slightly in my hand, making shadows jitter under the trailer. Nothing moved. I exhaled, tried to shake off the nerves, and crouched down so I could get a better angle. The cold bit through my jeans as my knee touched the dirt. I leaned forward, shoulder nearly brushing the sidewall of the last tire, and swung the flashlight across the length of the underside. Landing gear, fine. Cross members, fine. Spare tire rack, fine. No loose straps, no dragging chain. The beam slid over a patch of hanging road grime like stalactites over the differential housing. Then, something pale shot across the beam. It moved so fast my brain caught it in pieces. An elongated, human-looking arm, skin the color of candle wax. A hand with fingers too long, knuckles almost non-existent. The impression of something smooth and bare pulling itself along the steel. No fur, no clothing, no claws. Just pale, stretched flesh sliding flat across the underside of my trailer and vanishing into shadow toward the front. Every muscle in my thighs locked. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the night air. The scratching started again, louder now that I was low to the ground. Scritch, 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 scritch. It was faster, moving, coming closer along the frame. I didn't wait. I scrambled back, boots slipping in the gravel. One hand slamming down hard enough that a sharp stone dug into my palm. The flashlight beam jerked wildly, painting the trailer, the tires, the empty turnout in stuttering arcs. Something under there moved in response to me. I heard it, a sliding, scuttling sound, like hands and feet grabbing metal, not dirt. I got to my feet and backed toward the cab, not turning my back on the trailer, heartbeat punching in my throat. The hazards ticked on, patient, uncaring. By the time I reached the steps, I was half jumping, fingers tearing at the grab handle. I hauled myself up into the cab and yanked the door shut with a hollow thump that felt pathetically thin for what I wanted. I locked it, both sides. Habit said just the driver door. Something older told my hand to lean across and push the passenger lockdown too. For a second I sat there, breathing hard, flashlight still clutched in my hand, beam bouncing around the cab. The interior smelled like sweat and cold metal now, the outside air having followed me in. I killed the flashlight and flipped on the cargo lights instead. Their glow washed the trailer in white on the monitor of my little backup cam display. Nothing moved, just steel and straps. Then I checked the mirrors. Driver's side first. The side of the trailer was empty, marker lights glowing, reflectors steady. Passenger side mirror showed something else. At first I thought it was just shadow play. A dark mass under the middle of the trailer where the clearance lights didn't quite reach. But shadows don't grip. A figure was crawling along the underside of my trailer. Not hanging, crawling, upside down. Hands and feet planted on the steel, body parallel to the ground, pressed tight against the undercarriage like a spider on a ceiling. Its limbs were two long arms and legs both stretched out, elbows and knees bending in slight, unnatural arcs. It moved in short, quick jolts, like every grab was a separate thought. Its head was twisted, not turned to the side, twisted backward, chin tucked toward its spine, so the face was looking straight up at my cab while the body pointed toward the rear axles. In the mirror, pale eyes, too large, too reflective, met mine. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It didn't have hair that I could see, just skin stretched tight over a skull shape. The mouth was closed, lips thin, colorless. The skin along its shoulders and spine was marred with dark smears, grease, oil, road grime, like it had been dragging itself under vehicles for a long time. It paused when it reached the space just behind my cab, still upside down, fingers curled around the lower frame rail, staring. I didn't test how long it wanted to do that. My hand found the ignition out of pure instinct, even though the engine was already running. I dropped the truck into gear, released the brake with a shove that made the airlines bark, and buried my foot in the throttle. The Kenworth lurched. Gravel sprayed. The trailer groaned as the weight shifted. Then we were moving. First a roll, then a surge as the tires bit the asphalt and the turnout fell away behind me. For a heartbeat, the figure stayed perfectly in place in the mirror, as if glued to the steel. Then it began to move. Not backward, not thrown by inertia. It crawled forward, against the direction of travel, hands and feet gripping, body pressed flush to the underside as the highway blurred into lines below. It moved with ugly grace, too smooth for all those joints. It was trying to get closer to the cab. I brought us up to 40, then 50, steering steadier than my heart felt. The engine roared, but I could still hear it in my head. The imagined scrape of those hands on steel, the nails digging in. At around 60, the suspension hit a seam in the pavement. The rig bounced. The figure shuddered in the mirror, its grip strained, limbs bending in angles that made my stomach turn. For a moment it almost lost its hold. Then it slammed its hands down harder. I saw the fingers dig into the metal. Even from the cab, I could imagine the sound, nails or something like them scoring steel. It held on. A mile passed like that. Highway markers whipped by. The fence strobed in the corner of my eye. The thing under my trailer crawled, jerked, clung, its backward twisted head never breaking eye contact through the mirror's warped glass. I pushed to 65, 70. The wind noise around the cab climbed to a howl. The trailer swayed ever so slightly, empty space and heavy load fighting for balance. We hit a patch of rougher road, ripples in the pavement that made the whole rig shiver. The figure spasmed. One hand slipped, then a foot. Its body swung, pinwheeling, still clinging with two limbs, legs flailing out into the darkness beyond the trailer's edge. For the first time, its expression changed, mouth peeling open in a shape that wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite anything human. Then it lost its grip. It dropped out of frame, slamming into the asphalt in a tangle of pale arms and legs. For a split second I saw it in the convex mirror, rolling, then righting itself in a way no spine should allow, like a broken animal forcing itself upright. It disappeared into the dark at the edge of the beam from my trailer lights. I didn't slow down to see where it went. I didn't pull off again that night. I drove the remaining miles with my spine rigid and my eyes flicking between the mirrors and the road, half expecting to feel something drag itself back onto the frame, to hear that scratching rise up beneath my boots. It never did. I only stopped when the sky started to lighten and I reached the yard where I was due to unload. Even then, I sat in the cab a few extra seconds, the normal noises of a waking facility. Forklifts beeping, guys shouting, air tools hissing, fighting with the memory of that silent, pale shape under my trailer. I backed into a bay, set the brake, and climbed down on legs that felt less steady than usual. The yard's mechanic, a big guy named Torres who's seen more busted rigs than most of us have driven, met me with a clipboard. "Got time for a quick DOT look while they unload?" he asked. "Got a random?" "Yeah," I said automatically. My voice came out hoarse. He started the usual routine. Lights, tires, brakes. I stood off to the side, sipping lukewarm coffee, trying to convince myself exhaustion had turned shadows into monsters. Torres ducked under the trailer with his flashlight. He was down there longer than he should have been. "Luke," he called finally. His voice had something tight in it I'd never heard before. "Come look at this." I crouched down beside him, knees popping, the ground cold through my jeans. He angled the flashlight up at the underside of the frame. The steel was scored. Not in one place, everywhere. Long, parallel gouges ran along the crossmembers, some shallow, some deep enough to catch a fingertip. They tracked forward toward the cab from the rear axles, then clustered in that space just behind where my seat sat on the other side of the floor. "That ain't road rash," Torres said quietly. "That ain't from rocks or chains. You drag something over steel long enough, you see patterns." He shined the light on one section in particular, for gouges close together, slightly curved. They were the width of fingers. Whatever had been under there had tried to dig in, or dig through. Torres looked at me, one eyebrow up. "What the hell dragged itself under your rig last night?" I didn't answer him. Not fully. I said something about catching debris in the turnout, maybe rebar, maybe an old shopping cart. We both knew that was crap. Flatbed drivers watch their decks. They watch their straps. They watch their mirrors. Now, when I stop in a dark turnout to tighten anything, I watch the shadows underneath first. I still run that stretch past the Texas-Mexico line. Still haul steel and machinery and things that make real, understandable noises when they shift. But if I'm alone in a turnout at 3:40 in the morning and I hear scratching under my trailer, fast, patterned, deliberate, I don't crouch down to look anymore. Some things under there aren't trying to get out from the cold. They're trying to find a way in. I don't cross south very often. Most of my work keeps me on the U.S. side, Nogales, Laredo, El Paso runs. I know the ports, the checkpoints, the routine. But every once in a while, a customer insists on a direct delivery just over the line, and the company pays enough that you swallow whatever gut feeling you've got and take it. Name's Reed. I haul dry van in a white Cascadia, 10 years in the seat, most of that hugging the southwest border. I know the way the desert looks different on each side of the fence. I know how the air changes when you pass through the port, that strange static you get when you roll out of one country and into another. This trip was a rare southbound drop. Warehouse delivery on the Mexico side, backhaul empty to a yard on the US side. Nothing complicated on paper. The delivery went smoother than I expected. In and out, customs handled, trailer swept and sealed. By the time I cleared the southbound facility and came back through north into the States, it was just after 2:30 in the morning. The sky was cloudless, black as spilled ink. No moon. The stars looked low and sharp, but they didn't throw any light worth mentioning. The stretch of desert north of the border was almost completely empty. No town glow, no gas stations, just the faint line of border fence off to my right and the highway unspooling ahead. Inside the cab, it was that familiar cocoon. Dash lights dimmed to green, gauges steady, the hum of the engine under my boots, the faint rattle in the passenger door I'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. The air coming from the vents was warm enough to fight the chill, carrying the layered smell of diesel, stale coffee, dust, and old upholstery. Channel 19 was on volume low. Usually, near the border, there's always some chatter, border patrol units, other drivers calling out checkpoints, locals bleating over in Spanish. Tonight it was quiet. Not just quiet, dead. A thin hiss of static and nothing else. I rolled along at a comfortable 65, empty trailer riding light, steering wheel buzzing faintly in my hands. The road stretched out in my headlights, white stripes flashing by, reflectors winking in rhythm. No oncoming traffic, no taillights ahead. For maybe 20 minutes, it was just me and the desert. Then I glanced in my driver's side mirror. Something was behind me. At first, I thought it was just a darker patch of night riding the edge of the beam from my trailer lights. No glow, no points of light, just a block of black that sat too perfectly centered to be random shadow. I checked again, longer this time. There was a semi back there. No headlights, no marker lights, no cab lights, just the faintly visible outline of a tractor and trailer, picked up in slivers by the spill of my taillights and the occasional roadside reflector. It was far enough back that I couldn't see any detail, but the shape was clear, box on box, following my line. I listened for it. Even with the windows up, you can usually feel another rig on you, subtle, but it's there. A different vibration, a change in how the wind moves around your own trailer, the ghost of another engine note overlaying yours. Nothing, just my own engine, my own tires. I thumbed the mic, breaker 1 to 9, northbound out of the crossing. Anybody running behind a white Cascadia? You got your lights off, partner. The CB answered with a low, steady tone. Not static, not voice, a hum, just above a whisper, that thrummed in the speaker like a held note. It didn't change when I let go of the key. It didn't change when I turned the volume up or down. It just stayed. I set the mic back on its hook, eyes scanning the road ahead and the mirror in quick alternation. The dark shape behind me held its distance for another minute, then began to creep closer. I eased off the throttle to 60. It matched. No bobbing, no weaving, no headlight flickering as it came into range. Just that black mass drawing nearer in the mirror, slowly eating the gap. As it closed, my trailer lights did their work, spilling red over what followed me. More detail resolved. It was a Freightliner, old model, one of the square-nosed classic cabs, the kind they stopped making years back. The chrome on the bumper and grille didn't shine. It looked dark and dull, like it had been through a fire and never cleaned. The windshield was shattered, not a spiderweb crack, broken. The safety glass was crazed white, caved inward in a wide concave dent on the driver's side, as if something had hit it hard and never fully come out. No headlights occupied the sockets, just two empty, dark eyes. The way it moved was wrong. It didn't rise and dip with the road. It didn't lean in the soft curves. It glided, perfectly centered in the lane, trailer tracking straight as if it was carved out of a single piece of black stone and pushed along by something that had never read the rules of physics. I watched the touch, RPM steady, watched the speedometer, 60 miles per hour on the nose. The Freightliner slid closer without any sign of acceleration. No engine growl, no turbo whine, no shake in my cab. Every instinct I had started to buzz. I pushed the throttle gently, bringing my speed up to 65 again. The truck surged, pulling a little away from the shadow in my mirror. The thing behind me floated forward like it was attached by an invisible rope. The distance stayed the same, 50, maybe 60 feet off my ICC bar. "Come on," I muttered. "Show me something real." No lights, no sound, just that hum in the CB speaker, rising a hair when I tried to listen for anything else. The empty highway stretched on. The fence off to my right flickered in and out of peripheral view. A Border Patrol SUV sat on a dirt road a quarter mile out, dark, maybe empty. I kept expecting the Freightliner to make a move, to turn its lights on, to swing out for a pass, to fall back. It did none of those. Instead, it crept closer. 40 feet. 30. The trailer in my mirror loomed larger, featureless save for streaks on the side like smoke stains. The tractor's grille filled more of the glass, that dented, broken windshield shining pale like a spiderweb in my taillight wash. At about 25 feet, my skin started to crawl. A follow that close at night is suicide. Any brake tap from me and we'd fuse. I put my foot down. The Cascadia climbed up to 70. The empty trailer danced lightly, suspension humming. Wind grabbed at the cab. I felt the engine dig in. The road come a little more alive under my boots. The old Freightliner ignored all of it. It didn't lose an inch, didn't gain one. It was glued there, riding a distance no sane driver would hold. An arm's length of darkness behind 40,000 pounds of steel and air. The desert around us was silent. No other traffic. No distant glow of trucks. No bobbing dots of four-wheelers. Just me and this thing that should not have been on the road. Then it began to pull out. Not with any turn signal. Not with the little wobble you see when a driver checks their mirrors twice before committing. It just slid. In the mirror, the bulk of the truck drifted left, crossing the faded dashed white that divided the lanes. No turn of the wheels that I could see, no dip of the cab. One moment it was directly behind me. Next it was taking the passing lane, drawn up alongside my trailer. I felt nothing in the wheel. No bow wave. No change in wind noise. It was like it wasn't there at all. But it was. As it came up, even with my rear axles, I could see more detail. The trailer's side panel was burned in places, buckled outward, then blackened as if flames had washed along it in sheets. Rubber streaked the lower edge like something had blown and spun and been dragged. The tractor slid into my peripheral vision. The driver's side of the cab was smashed, door crumpled, mirror arm twisted off and hanging by a cable that defied gravity, swinging without moving. The tank on that side was rippled, scarred, the metal warped into waves. The windshield was a white spiderweb cave-in. Glass punched inward from some long-ago impact. Behind the shattered safety glass, there was movement. A figure slumped in the driver's seat. What was left of one. The skin I could see was blackened, cracked, shiny in places where it had melted and rehardened. The jaw hung at a wrong angle. The fabric of the uniform shirt, some kind of old company colors, logo burned to a ghost, clung in patches. The head tilted toward me as the truck drew level with my cab. The eye sockets glowed, not like headlights, not bright enough to throw beams. A dull orange, the color of coals under ash when you poke a dying fire. They flickered faintly as it turned its ruined face toward my window. For a heartbeat, everything in me wanted to look away. Instinct lost. Those coal-lit sockets locked on mine through 2 panes of glass and 30 years of fire. The mouth moved, just a crack, skin splitting with the motion. No sound came through. Not through my window, not through the CB, not through the thin desert air. I realized my hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, arms locked. The speedometer needle twitched at 72. The road under my headlights felt suddenly too narrow for both of us. I did the only reckless thing that felt less dangerous than letting that wrecked ghost ride beside me. I yanked the wheel right, not enough to flip the trailer, but enough to make the rig lurch, tires complaining, suspension barking as I straddled the line toward the shoulder. Gravel spit from the edge of the asphalt. The trailer listed for a second, then caught. Instinct said there'd be impact. Metal on metal. A screech, a bang, a shower of glass. There was nothing. In my side window, the old Freightliner vanished. One frame burned into my brain of that blackened face and those ember eyes, and then empty desert night. No brake lights flashing ahead. No tail of a trailer fading into distance. No looming shape in the mirror dropping back. Just my own reflection in the glass, wide-eyed, and the fence flicking past in the dark. I hauled the rig back into my lane, heart hammering, mouth dry as cotton. The CB hum that had been buzzing under everything cut off mid-note, leaving only engine and wind. I drove the next 20 miles like a rookie, 10 and 2, checking my mirrors every few seconds, waiting for that shape to materialize again. It never did. The road stayed empty until I hit the first cluster of lights near a small town and the illusion of safety that comes with gas stations and fast food signs. I didn't stop until I reached our company yard just before dawn. The sun was a smudge of pale orange on the horizon when I backed into a slot and killed the engine. The world reasserted itself. Birds somewhere, forklifts beeping, another driver laughing too loud on his phone. I should have gone to sleep. Instead, I went to look at my trailer. In the growing light, the white side panel showed every smear and streak from the road. Dust, bug guts, the usual. I walked the length of it, not sure what I expected to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe proof that I'd lost my mind for a few miles back there. About halfway down the passenger side, just above the rub rail, I found it. A handprint, not in dirt, not the greasy smudge you get from someone steadying themselves. This was burned into the steel, the outline of a human hand, fingers spread, palm flat, seared into the metal skin of the trailer as if pressed there by something unbearably hot. The edges were bubbled, warped subtly outward. The paint had blistered and peeled, revealing blackened steel beneath. In the center of the palm shape, the metal had a faint blue tinge like it had been heated close to the point of giving way. I held my own hand up to it. It was bigger than mine. Not by much, but enough. The fingers were a little too long, the palm too narrow. The proportion was wrong in a way I felt in my gut more than saw with my eyes. A mechanic walking by slowed when he saw me staring. "Trailer catch some heat?" he asked, squinting. "Looks like you backed into a torch." "Something like that," I said. He whistled low, ran a glove over the edge of the mark. "Whatever did that, you're lucky it didn't go through. This is some scary temp." He moved on. Yard life swallowed him back up. Later, off shift, in the driver's room, I heard an older guy talking about a wreck from back in the day, before my time. Old freightliner, company long gone. Caught fire south of the border. Driver never made it out. They said the charred shell of the tractor sat in a lot down there for years, half stripped, like a warning nobody listened to. He described the color, the body style, the route. It drew a line straight through where I'd driven that night. I didn't tell him about the truck with no lights that glided out of Mexico behind me. Didn't tell him about the ember eyes. Didn't tell him about the handprint seared into my trailer that took 3 days and a grinder to fully erase. I still run that crossing when the money's right. Still roll empty back into the States with the desert spread out black and silent ahead. But I watch my mirrors more on those nights. If I ever see an old Freightliner shape behind me with dead headlights and a smashed windshield, floating closer without a sound, I won't wait for it to pull alongside. Some trucks you can pass. Some you can outrun. And some, if they've got one foot in a fire they never left, will follow you out of a country you never wanted to enter in the first place.